Chapter 23-26. In addition to the array master who set up the array formation, a powerful array formation would also require an astronomical amount of resources to set up. The more powerful an array was, the more immortal stones and spirit stones it required to maintain it every day would be astronomical. The array above the Valley of the Medicine Masters consumed at least dozens of immortal stones every day. Once it was fully activated, it would probably consume thousands of immortal stones. Apart from the wealthy Valley of the Medicine Masters, no other sect in the 9 zones could set up such a large array. The Heavenly 6 Directions Indestructible Array lives up to its name. Chu Fengmian had long heard that the Valley of the Medicine Masters had such an invincible array. Seeing it with his own eyes, Chu Fengmian knew that the rumors were true. Such a large array was almost impossible to break. However, with the Tianjian sect and the Sage Rulers sect as examples, the Valley of the Medicine Masters did not dare to underestimate Chu Fengmian. In the Valley of the Medicine Masters, several powerful auras rose. These auras erupted as if to warn Chu Fengmian. 5 peak immortal kings, another 19 immortal kings, and dozens of immortal marquises. Chu Fengmian observed below. The number of experts in the Valley of the Medicine Masters was indeed much more than the Sage Rulers sect and the Tianjian sect. 5 peak immortal kings and 19 ordinary immortal kings. Such a force was almost comparable to the combined forces of the Tianjian sect and the Sage Rulers sect. Many of the immortal kings had different auras. Obviously, they came from different forces. These people were all worshippers of the Valley of the Medicine Masters or experts who had signed a contract with the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Now that the Valley of the Medicine Masters was in trouble, they rushed back immediately. The strength of the Valley of the Medicine Masters is too terrifying. Among the 9 zones, the sect that should not be provoked is the Valley of the Medicine Masters. This time, this person is going to kick an iron plate. He's too arrogant to choose such a difficult bone to chew. This person is riding a tiger and can't get off. There were also many warriors who marveled at the power displayed by the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Apart from the Valley of the Medicine Masters, no other force among the 7 major sects could produce such a force. Although the Valley of the Medicine Masters was the most low-key of the 7 major sects, their hidden strength was the most terrifying. Suddenly, an old man walked out slowly from the Valley of the Medicine Masters. This old man was dressed in a dragon robe and had a crown on his head. He was enveloped in a 7-colored glow as he slowly walked out from the Valley of the Medicine Masters. It's Yao Qingshan, the head of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. It is said that this person is the Medicine Master's disciple, but his martial attainment has already surpassed the Medicine Master. Rumor has it that after the battle against the Sword Dao sect 10,000 years ago, he went into seclusion. He actually came out today. Seeing this old man appear, a cultivator also spoke out. Although the Medicine Master was the oldest patriarch in the Valley of the Medicine Masters, he was usually engrossed in the way of medicine and rarely appeared in the world. Even during the siege of the Sword Dao sect 10,000 years ago, the Medicine Master did not participate in the battle against the Master of the Sword Dao. Usually, Yao Qingshan was in charge of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. In the hearts of the people, the person who could truly control the Valley of the Medicine Masters was him, not the Medicine Master. Yao Qingshan slowly walked out from the depths of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Behind him were many middle-aged men. These people were the various elders of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. As this group of people walked out, Yao Qingshan's gaze did not fall on Chu Fengmian first. Instead, it fell on the Alcade Star Emperor beside Chu Fengmian. Alcade Star Emperor, you and the Valley of the Medicine Masters have no enmity. Today, you have come to help this person attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Are you planning to completely fall out with the Valley of the Medicine Masters? Yao Qingshan's tone seemed calm, but everyone could hear the cold arrogance in his voice. Although you betrayed the Imperial Pivot Hall, you used to belong to the side of the 7 major sections. Today, you have made an enemy of the 7 major sects for this person. How foolish. This person is already a dead man today. Why don't you quickly wake up and join forces with me to kill this person and make up for your crimes? Otherwise what? The Alcade Star Emperor did not speak. Instead, it was Chu Fengmian who suddenly finished the sentence. His eyes were cold. I'm a dead man. I'd like to see who can kill me today. The Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect have both been destroyed. I don't mind destroying another Sage Monarch sect. Chu Fengmian's tone was extremely cold. These words were arrogant to the extreme. But for a moment, the people who heard these words could not even refute. What Chu Fengmian said was the truth. The Sage Monarch sect and the Tianjian sect had both been destroyed by Chu Fengmian. Although the current Medicine Master Valley seemed indestructible, the Sky Sword sect and the Sage Monarch sect had been similar back then. However, these two great sects had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had already accomplished many things that everyone thought were impossible. Today, Chu Fengmian dared to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters because he had something to rely on. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, many of the warriors in the Valley of the Medicine Masters had fear in their eyes. But when they saw the great array above the Valley of the Medicine Masters, the fear in their eyes dissipated. With the protection of such an invincible great array, they were not afraid of Chu Fengmian. What big words! Chu Jianbai, do you think the Valley of the Medicine Masters is the same as the Sage Monarch sect? Today, you don't even have the right to destroy the great array of the Medicine Masters, let alone destroy the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Standing behind Yao Qingshan, an elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters stared at Chu Fengmian with some disdain. Chu Jianbai, I think you can't even protect yourself now. In a few hours, it will be the time of your death. When you die, the Sword Dao sect you created will be buried with you. You'd better think about how to save your pitiful Sword Dao sect. I heard that you still have a few women. I guess the Demon Emperor is quite interested in them. I just don't know if you can survive until then. Do you want to die, Medicine Ancient Path? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with endless murderous intent. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. Suddenly, he looked at the elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters behind Yao Qingshan. The sword in his hand suddenly moved and slashed down. The moment the sword slashed out, the power of the stars filled the air. The mystery of the 9 mysterious swordplay was fully displayed. The 7 styles were all displayed and turned into a sword chi galaxy that slashed towards the Medicine Ancient Path. This sword chi galaxy was tens of thousands of feet wide. It fell from the sky and slashed in the direction of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Do you think such a great array can protect you? If I want to kill you, no one can stop me. Chapter 23-27. Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. The sword chi galaxy slashed down and crashed into the Valley of the Medicine Masters. For a moment, it seemed as if it would kill every living thing in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Impudent! But at this moment, the Valley Lord of the Medicine Masters, Yao Qingshan, suddenly shouted coldly. He waved his hand, and suddenly, a burst of immortal power gathered in his hand. It suddenly shot up into the sky and collided with the sword chi galaxy. This time, Yao Qingshan attacked not only with his own power, but also with the power of the mountain guarding array of the Medicine Master's Valley. For a moment, a vast sea of immortal power shrouded the sword chi galaxy. The surging immortal power seemed to want to devour the sword chi galaxy completely. Trying to devour my sword? Chu Fengmian saw Yao Qingshan attack and suddenly sneered. Devour. Suddenly, a huge shadow of the heaven-devouring beast appeared behind Chu Fengmian. At the same time, the heaven-devouring power in Chu Fengmian's body was fully activated and gathered on his sword. Suddenly, a huge vortex formed in the sword chi galaxy. The giant vortex suddenly devoured all the immortal force that was surging toward it. In an instant, this huge vortex began to devour. The power of the mountain guarding array of the Medicine Master's Valley was constantly being devoured. The devouring power poured into the sword aura galaxy. Not only was the power of the sword aura galaxy not stopped, but its power rose steadily and poured down like a tsunami. Rumble! In an instant, the sword chi galaxy broke through the mountain guarding array of the Medicine Master's Valley and suddenly rushed into the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Yao Gudao, who had mocked and threatened Chu Fengmian earlier, was immediately swept into the Sword Aura Star River. He did not even have the time to struggle before his body was killed by the countless sword aura contained within it. His blood essence was mercilessly devoured, and he couldn't be more dead. Just at this moment, Yi Zichen was stunned. Yao Gudao, who had been extremely arrogant and mocking Chu Fengmian, was killed by Chu Fengmian on the spot. It happened so quickly that the few peak immortal kings in the Medicine Master's Valley couldn't react in time. They didn't expect the mountain guarding array of the Medicine Master's Valley to be unable to stop Chu Fengmian. The mountain guarding array of the Medicine Master's Valley could even withstand the attack of a true immortal master, but now it couldn't stop Chu Fengmian. They didn't even have the time to act. Chu Fengmian's heaven-devouring secret technique. It was the nemesis of almost all arrays. If others wanted to break the formation, there were only two ways. One was to grasp the Tao of formations and explore the mysteries of the formation and attack the formation to break the formation. The other was to break the formation with brute force. Fengmian, with Fengmian heaven-devouring secret technique. Such a huge formation was nothing more than a live target in front of Chu Fengmian's heaven-devouring power. The great protective mountain array couldn't stop Chu Fengmian at all. Seeing the fall of Yao Gudao, the faces of many experts in the Valley of the Medicine Masters turned ashen. Yao Qingshan's face, in particular, was extremely ugly. An elder of the Medicine Master's Valley was killed by Chu Fengmian in the Medicine Master's Valley. Yao Qingshan had just mocked Chu Fengmian and said he was about to die, but now it wasn't Chu Fengmian who died, but someone from the Medicine Master's Valley. Yao Qingshan's face was filled with anger. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Chu Jianbai, do you really think you can hide the truth from us? There are so many of us. If we attack together, it'll be easy to kill you. You can try. Chu Fengmian heard Yao Qingshan's words and said disapprovingly. Although I can't kill all of you with my own strength, it won't be a problem to kill most of you. It's worth it to let the Medicine Master's Valley die with me. Why? Yao Qingshan, do you plan to attack first? Chu Fengmian looked at Yao Qingshan with cold murderous intent in his eyes. You? It's easy for me to kill you. If you dare to attack first, I'll kill you first. Chu Fengmian's tone was relaxed, but the murderous intent in his words was chilling. Chu Fengmian's attack on the Valley of the Medicine Masters this time was already prepared for a life-and-death struggle. Even if the Valley of the Medicine Masters besieged Chu Fengmian, it was likely that most of the experts among them would fall. At that time, even if the Medicine Masters Valley still existed, it would be in name only. This kid is ruthless. There were also warriors who marveled at Chu Fengmian's madness. The stronger a powerhouse was, the less willing they were to fight to the death. For example, the immortal kings of the 7 major sects were all patriarchs with extraordinary status. They lacked power and prestige. Who would be willing to fight to the death like this? But Chu Fengmian was an exception. Chu Fengmian had no intention of returning alive this time. If they pushed Chu Fengmian too far, they didn't doubt that Chu Fengmian had the ability to perish together with the Medicine Master's Valley. Chu Fengmian's strength had been displayed incisively and vividly when he attacked the Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect. If Chu Fengmian really wanted to fight to the death, the people of the Medicine Master's Valley wouldn't be able to stop Chu Fengmian. At the very least, the number of powerhouses present who could survive would be less than 5. The various immortal king powerhouses of the Medicine Master's Valley were originally furious. However, when they heard Chu Fengmian's words, fear appeared in their eyes. They had all experienced Chu Fengmian's madness. He would definitely do what he said. Because of one sentence, Chu Fengmian would not hesitate to face the great array of the Medicine Master's Valley and bombard the Medicine Ancient Path. Many people had originally wanted to ridicule Chu Fengmian, but now they didn't dare to say a word. They didn't want to end up like the Medicine Ancient Path. The Sword Dao sect that you created will also be buried with you. You'd better think carefully about how to preserve your pitiful Sword Dao sect. I heard that you still have a few women. I reckon that the Demon Emperor is quite interested in them. I just don't know if you'll be able to survive until then. Medicine ancient path, do you have a death wish? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with endless murderous intent. Chu Fengmian's eyes were incomparably cold. He suddenly looked at the medicine master's valley elder behind Yao Qingshan. Suddenly, the sword in his hand moved and slashed down fiercely. The moment the sword slashed out, the power of the stars filled the air. The mystery of the 9 mysterious sword technique was fully displayed. The 7 forms were all displayed, transforming into a sword chi galaxy that slashed towards the medicine ancient path. This sword chi galaxy was tens of thousands of feet long. It fell from the sky and slashed in the direction of the medicine master's valley. Do you think a formation like this can protect you? If I want to kill you, no one can stop me. Chapter 23-28. Chu Jianbai, what are you trying to do? In the end, it was Yao Qingshan who spoke. His voice broke the silence. Yao Qingshan's eyes were fixed on Chu Fengmian. It seemed as though he was thinking about something. If Chu Fengmian wanted to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters, he would have done so long ago. She wouldn't be like this, poking and threatening. Given Chu Fengmian's character, if he really wanted to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters, he would not delay. Now that Chu Fengmian was being so forceful, it meant that Chu Fengmian had no intention of attacking Medicine King Valley. This made Yao Qingshan breathe a sigh of relief. He was also worried that Chu Fengmian had really gone mad and wanted to drag the entire Valley of the Medicine Masters down with him. It could be said that the strength of the Valley of the Medicine Masters was created by Yao Qingshan. The Medicine Master was extremely mysterious. Other than the medicine Dao that had been passed down, he had not appeared in the Valley of the Medicine Masters more than a few times. The one who had truly nurtured the Valley of the Medicine Masters to this stage was Yao Qingshan. He did not want the Valley of the Medicine Masters to be destroyed because of Chu Fengmian's madness. However, Yao Qingshan did not dare to be too relaxed. He also knew that with Chu Fengmian's appetite, even if he did not attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters today, nothing good would come out of it. You are indeed a smart person. There is no need to waste so much breath when communicating with smart people. Hearing Yao Qingshan's words, Chu Fengmian smiled and praised. However, this praise was extremely harsh to Yao Qingshan's ears. Chu Jianbai, what are you trying to do? You don't have much time now. As far as I know, the experts of the Ancient Desolate Sect, 6 Demon Sects, Ancient Moon Valley, and Tianshu Hall have all gathered together. Yao Qingshan said calmly. These words were like a threat and also a reminder. He did not want the Valley of the Medicine Masters to fight to the death with Chu Fengmian, but he wanted to see the other major sects fight with Chu Fengmian. It would be best if both sides suffered. The 7 major sects had always chosen to stand together at critical moments. However, there were always small conflicts on a daily basis. Especially today, although Chu Fengmian came in a threatening manner, in Yaoqing Mountain, Chu Fengmian was also a person who was about to die. He was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Sooner or later, he would be a dead man. As for Chu Fengmian's death, the so-called Sword Dao sect was simply unable to withstand a single blow. There were no more hidden dangers. By then, without the threat of Chu Fengmian, Medicine King Valley would still have to face the other major sections. If Chu Fengmian could fight with the Desolate Ancient Sect and the 6 demonic gates until both sides suffered, that would be what he wanted. Although there isn't much time, it's more than enough to destroy the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Chu Fengmian smiled when he heard Yao Qingshan's words. The little scheme in Yao Qingshan's words couldn't be hidden from him. The 7 great sects were still scheming against each other at this time. If Chu Fengmian didn't have the threat of an external enemy, the 7 great sects wouldn't have been able to join forces more than a few times in the past 10,000 years. It was no wonder that when Chu Fengmian attacked the Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect, they hadn't been willing to help. After all, having 1 or 2 less sects was a good thing for them, as they could divide more benefits. As for Chu Fengmian, in their eyes, he was already a dead man. Once he lost the incarnation of the ancient white wolf, the strength of Chu Fengmian's side would plummet. When that time came, it would be easy for them to join forces and besiege Chu Fengmian. Yao Qingshan wanted to divert the trouble, but before he got what he wanted, he wouldn't let the Valley of the Medicine Masters go. Chu Jianbai, what do you mean? Do you really want to fight to the death with the Valley of the Medicine Masters? Yao Qingshan said with some anger when he heard the threat in Chu Fengmian's words. With his status, when had he ever been threatened like this? Which force wasn't extremely respectful and courteous when facing the Valley of the Medicine Masters? Even the forces of the three sacred regions were extremely courteous to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. If it had been someone else who casually threatened to destroy the Valley of the Medicine Masters like Chu Fengmian, he would have slapped that person to death. However, when facing Chu Fengmian, Yao Qingshan didn't dare to do anything other than feel angry. He knew how crazy Chu Fengmian was. If he really angered Chu Fengmian, he might really fight to the death with the Valley of the Medicine Masters. When that happened, the Valley of the Medicine Masters, which had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, would be buried with Chu Fengmian. Even he might be buried with Chu Fengmian. This was something he didn't want to see. Today, I can let the Valley of the Medicine Masters off, but I have a condition. Seeing the anger on Yao Qingshan's face, Chu Fengmian didn't continue to threaten him. He had already hammered enough. This time, Chu Fengmian chose to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters, but in reality, he didn't really have any intention of attacking the Valley of the Medicine Masters. After all, Chu Fengmian was well aware of the strength of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Even if he went all out, he would only end up with the Valley of the Medicine Masters suffering heavy losses and dragging the Valley of the Medicine Masters down with him. Although Chu Fengmian was crazy, at this time, he wasn't in such a desperate situation, so there was no need to go all out. Chu Fengmian's real purpose in coming to the Valley of the Medicine Masters was to obtain the elixirs of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Chu Fengmian's immoral true body had already begun to have hopes of breaking through to the 5th level of the immoral true body after plundering a large number of elixirs from the Sage Monarch sect. Now, what Chu Fengmian lacked the most were elixirs related to the way of the body. When it came to elixirs, there was no other force in the 9 zones that could compare to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. The Valley of the Medicine Masters was famous for its way of the Medicine Masters and was also involved in the elixir business in the 9 zones. The number of elixirs they had accumulated was definitely far more than what the Sage Monarch sect had. Chu Fengmian's purpose was to plunder the Valley of the Medicine Masters' elixirs related to the way of the body in order to break through to the 5th level of the immoral true body. Previously, Chu Fengmian had aggressively pretended to attack in order to give Yao Qingshan and the powerhouses of the Valley of the Medicine Masters a warning. After all, the people of the Valley of the Medicine Masters were people who wouldn't cry until they saw the coffin. Only after they witnessed Chu Fengmian's true strength would they be obedient. Now that the warning was over, it was time to get to the point. This jade talisman contains my conditions. If you can accept them, I can let the Valley of the Medicine Masters off today. A jade talisman suddenly condensed in the palm of Chu Fengmian's hand and flew in the direction of Yao Qingshan. Yao Qingshan caught the jade talisman and injected a surge of immoral qi into it. He immediately read the message within, and his expression changed abruptly. His face suddenly showed signs of anger, like an enraged lion, and his murderous intent exploded. Chapter 23-29. Seeing Yao Qingshan's attitude, many of the surrounding experts were shocked. They didn't know what Yao Qingshan had seen to make him so angry. Yao Qingshan's current attitude made it seem like he could attack Chu Fengmian at any time. Chu Fengmian stood in the air and watched all this coldly. His expression didn't change at all. It was as if Yao Qingshan's current attitude was completely under Chu Fengmian's control. Yao Qingshan, what do you think? Agree to this condition and I will let Medicine King Valley off today. This condition shouldn't be too difficult for you to accept. Chu Fengmian looked at Yao Qingshan and said casually. There were only 2 conditions in his jade talisman. The first condition was to give Chu Fengmian all the body-refining pills above the primeval sacred pill level in Medicine King Valley. This condition was also the purpose of Chu Fengmian's visit to Medicine King Valley. The pills in Medicine King Valley were too many. Just the body-refining pills alone were as numerous as the stars in the sky. Chu Fengmian couldn't recognize all of them. Therefore, his condition was to ask for all body-refining pills above the primeval sacred pill level. As for pills below the primeval sacred pill level, the improvement to Chu Fengmian was minimal. Even if Chu Fengmian swallowed tens of thousands of them, it wouldn't bring him much benefit. Naturally, Chu Fengmian didn't need them. The second condition was something that Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of and added later. Chu Fengmian also wanted the blood essence of demon gods above the immortal lord level that Medicine King Valley had accumulated. The more powerful a demon god was, the more pure and powerful their blood essence would be. Using the blood essence of demon beasts to refine pills was not a secret in the 9 regions. This kind of pill was called a blood pill. Although there might be some impurities in it, the power it contained was incomparably great. Therefore, many experts were willing to pay for it. The blood pills that Medicine King Valley refined every year were definitely not few. There must be blood essence of demon gods in them. The formation of the inscriptions in Chu Fengmian's immortal real body required a large amount of blood essence of experts above the immortal lord level. It just so happened that Medicine King Valley had it. Chu Fengmian decided to ask for all of it. Anyway, Chu Fengmian was confident that Medicine King Valley would agree to his conditions. Medicine King Valley now had no ability to refuse. Chu Fengmian was already an arrow at the end of its flight. No one was willing to risk their lives to fight a dying man. As long as it was not a condition that would completely destroy Medicine King Valley, no matter how harsh Chu Fengmian's demands were, Medicine King Valley should not refuse. However, although Chu Fengmian's conditions were not so exaggerated as to destroy the Valley of the Medicine Masters, they were still extremely harsh. It was enough to hurt the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Although there were many martialists in the 9 zones who cultivated the body-tempering path, most martialists and face celestials would choose to temper their bodies as their strength increased. The best way to temper one's body was to rely on elixirs of the body-refining Tao. Therefore, in the Valley of the Medicine Masters, there were definitely a lot of elixirs for the way of the body. Now, in a single breath, Chu Fengmian wanted all the body-refining pills above the primordial sacred pill level in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. This condition was simply cutting off the flesh of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Even the Valley of the Medicine Masters may not have been able to accumulate so many body-refining pills in thousands of years. Chu Fengmian's second condition was no less harsh than the first condition. When Yao Qingshan saw these 2 conditions, the corners of his mouth twitched. His murderous intent rose to the sky without any concealment. He raised his head and stared at Chu Fengmian. He wished he could kill Chu Fengmian right now and tear him to pieces. However, reason allowed Yao Qingshan to suppress the murderous intent in his heart. Today, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he was not willing to risk his life with Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian happened to see through this. Therefore, although Chu Fengmian's conditions were extremely harsh, in reality, it was not to the extent that the Valley of the Medicine Masters could not accept. There were generally 4 types of elixirs: cultivation elixirs for breaking through to the next realm, healing elixirs for healing, body-tempering elixirs for tempering the body, and special elixirs for activating the violet power of secret techniques. Among these 4 types, cultivation elixirs for breaking through to the next realm were the most valuable. After all, for all martialists and face celestials, breaking through to the next realm was the best way to increase their strength. It was also the purest way. In order to break through to the next realm, they were willing to do anything. Secondly, there were healing pills. They were pills that could save one's life at critical moments. Body-tempering elixirs were extremely valuable, but they were not as valuable as the first 2 types. If it were the first 2 types, Yao Qingshan would definitely refuse without hesitation. At worst, he would fight to the death with Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian's conditions were body-tempering elixirs. Although these conditions were harsh, they were not unacceptable. Furthermore, in his opinion, these elixirs would only be left on Chu Fengmian for a period of time. In any case, Chu Fengmian would be a dead man in 2 hours at most. How many elixirs could Chu Fengmian consume in 2 hours? The remaining ones would eventually be taken back by Yao Qingshan. However, Yao Qingshan found it difficult to agree to the second condition immediately. I can agree to the first condition. As for the second condition, I can give you half of the blood essence of martialists and face celestials in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Yao Qingshan suddenly transmitted a thought to Chu Fengmian. He did not want to expose the conditions between them. After all, if others knew that the Medicine Masters Valley had paid such a huge price to seek peace, it would be a loss of face for the Medicine Masters Valley. Chu Fengmian knew this, so he did not announce the conditions loudly. Instead, he told Yao Qingshan through a jade talisman. Half of the blood essence of martialist face celestials? When Chu Fengmian heard Yao Qingshan's thought, his mind spun. He had already killed Wu Yinling, Emperor Wu, and the others. Their blood essence had been devoured by Chu Fengmian and stored in his immortal true body. He was preparing to use it to condense the fourth inscription. However, condensing the fourth inscription was much more difficult than condensing the third inscription, even though Chu Fengmian had killed all the Sage Monarch sect experts. He still lacked some blood essence to condense the fourth inscription. The Medicine Masters Valley stored half of the blood essence of martialist face celestials. Chu Fengmian did not know exactly how much blood essence there was. However, with the heritage of the Medicine Masters Valley, which had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, there was definitely a lot of blood essence. It was enough to fill the gap in condensing the fourth inscription. Chu Fengmian did not want to push Yao Qingshan into a corner. After all, if he did, Chu Fengmian would not be able to obtain anything at all. His conditions had almost touched Yao Qingshan's bottom line. Chapter 2330. Half of the essence blood reserve was enough for Chu Fengmian to condense the fourth immortal inscription. Chu Fengmian's plan today was to let the Valley of the Medicine Masters off temporarily. When Chu Fengmian's strength improved, the essence blood of the Valley of the Medicine Masters would still be his. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian did not hesitate and replied to Yao Qingshan through voice transmission. All right, half. I can agree to this condition. Hand over the elixirs and essence blood, and I will leave immediately. All right. Yao Qingshan saw that Chu Fengmian had agreed to this condition and heaved a sigh of relief. What he was most afraid of was Chu Fengmian going all out. Now that Chu Fengmian was willing to retreat, he could finally relax a little. Yao Qingshan said a few words to the elders of the Valley of the Medicine Masters behind him. The elders of the Valley of the Medicine Masters turned into light and entered the Valley of the Medicine Masters. In a short while, the elders of the Valley of the Medicine Masters returned. The leader of the group was holding an empty ring in his hand. He handed the empty ring to Yao Qingshan. These are all the body-enhancing elixirs above the level of primeval sacred elixirs in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Half of them are stored in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Yao Qingshan came to Chu Fengmian's side and handed the empty ring to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian injected a stream of energy into the empty ring. Suddenly, the scene in the empty ring was reflected in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Just a glance was enough to surprise Chu Fengmian. So many? Chu Fengmian took a casual look and saw that there were more than 1,000 primeval sacred elixirs in the empty ring. As for the immortal elixirs, there were more than 100 of them. This number was more than double the number of elixirs that Chu Fengmian had obtained from the Sage Monarch sect. The quality of the elixirs in this empty ring was obviously much better than those in the Sage Monarch sect. When it came to alchemy, there was no sect in the 9 regions that could compete with the Valley of the Medicine Masters. The quality of the elixirs refined by the Valley of the Medicine Masters was also the best in the 9 regions. Otherwise, there would not be so many strong people who had traveled thousands of miles just to get the Valley of the Medicine Masters to refine elixirs. However, this number still exceeded Chu Fengmian's expectations. The Sage Monarch sect was a sect that specialized in cultivating the way of the body. Hence, they had a large stockpile of body-enhancing elixirs. Chu Fengmian had originally estimated that the Medicine Master Valley would have more body-enhancing elixirs than the Sage Monarch sect. Chu Fengmian didn't expect it to be more than double. This harvest made Chu Fengmian overjoyed. He planned to break through to the 5th level of the immortal true body. Chu Fengmian was only at the threshold, and he wasn't sure if he could succeed. However, the more body-refining pills he had, the more confident Chu Fengmian would be in reaching the 5th level of the immortal true body. In addition to the pills, the amount of blood essence in the ring also amazed Chu Fengmian. There were more than 100 immortal marquee blood essences. Every portion of blood essence was equivalent to the condensed blood essence of a martial artist. There were more than 100 immortal marquee blood essences. This was equivalent to Chu Fengmian killing 100 immortal marquee experts. However, these 100 portions of blood essence didn't mean that the Medicine Master Valley had really killed more than 100 immortal marquee experts. Demonic beasts and desolate beasts were much larger than humans, and the amount of blood essence in their bodies was also much more than that of human martial artists. Killing a demonic beast could yield more than a dozen portions of blood essence. One only needed to kill 7 or 8 immortal marquee beasts to obtain more than 100 portions of blood essence. However, demonic beasts and desolate beasts of the same level were much more powerful than martial artists of the same level. Killing demonic beasts consecutively was extremely dangerous. With so much blood essence, it would be a huge fortune if he took it out. Chu Fengmian didn't really care about the 100 portions of blood essence. What he really cared about was the blood essence of those above the immortal marquee, the immortal king realm, and even the pinnacle of the immortal king realm. Chu Fengmian wanted to condense the immortal inscription. Although the blood essence of immortal marquee was effective, the effect was negligible. The blood essence of immortal kings, or even the pinnacle of the immortal king realm, was still useful. More than 20 pinnacle immortal king realm blood essences, and 3 pinnacle immortal king realm blood essences. Chu Fengmian observed for a while and counted silently. This amount was similar to Chu Fengmian's prediction. There should still be some blood essence of immortal kings left in the Medicine Master Valley. After all, with the strength of the Medicine Master in Yao Qingshan, it wouldn't be a problem for them to kill some immortal king realm demonic beasts and desolate beasts. However, the blood essence of a pinnacle immortal king wasn't so easy to obtain. Now, Chu Fengmian had obtained half of the Medicine Master Valley's inventory, and there were only 3 portions left. Pinnacle immortal king realm demonic beasts and desolate beasts required at least several immortal king realm experts, or even immortal monarch realm experts, to hunt them down. Moreover, they had to bear an extremely great risk. Each portion was priceless. The Medicine Master Valley had paid a great price to obtain these few portions of blood essence of a pinnacle immortal king. As for the blood essence of those above the pinnacle immortal king realm, there wasn't a single portion. However, with the power of the Medicine Master Valley, it was impossible that there wasn't a single immortal monarch realm blood essence. After all, other than hunting demonic beasts and killing martial artists, there was another way to obtain blood essence. That was to search for it in some ancient ruins. Blood essence was also a kind of hard currency among martial artists and demon gods. It was needed to enhance one's strength and refine blood pills. For example, in ancient times, there were a large number of demon Dao experts who killed others and seized their blood essence to enhance their strength. From ancient ruins, there might be immortal monarch realm blood essence and even immortal saint realm blood essence. However, the Medicine Master Valley obviously didn't intend to hand it over. After all, the Medicine Master Valley didn't want Chu Fengmian to grow. Chu Fengmian knew this, but he didn't want to fuss over it. For Chu Fengmian, this amount of blood essence was enough for him to condense the 4th immortal inscription. Now, condensing the immortal inscription and improving his strength was the most important thing for Chu Fengmian to do. As for the grudge with the Medicine Master Valley, Chu Fengmian could slowly settle it with them in the future. Let's go! Chu Fengmian picked up the empty ring and put it away. Then, he gave the Alcade Star Emperor and the Ancient White Wolf a look and immediately escaped into the void. He's finally gone. Watching Chu Fengmian's escape light leave, many disciples of the Medicine Master Valley looked a lot more relaxed. They all breathed a sigh of relief. They looked at Chu Fengmian with incomparable fear. If Chu Fengmian really fought to the death with the Medicine Master Valley, they would be the ones to suffer. Chapter 2331. The elders of the Valley of the Medicine Masters might be able to escape, but ordinary disciples like them couldn't even withstand the aftermath of Chu Fengmian's attack. Valley Master, are we going to let him go just like that? Looking at Chu Fengmian's departing figure, the faces of the elders standing behind Yao Qingshan turned ugly. Chu Fengmian's conditions were extremely harsh. The thousands of years of savings of the Valley of the Medicine Masters would all belong to Chu Fengmian. Don't worry, those elixirs will still belong to us. This kid won't live long. When Yao Qingshan heard the words of these elders, his face revealed a sinister expression. Do you think it's so easy to take advantage of the Valley of the Medicine Masters? I've already left an imprint on that empty ring. I've already told the experts of the Desolate Ancient Sect and the 6 demon sects about the aura of the imprint. When the Desolate Ancient White Wolf disappears, that kid will die. If he wants to escape now, he won't be able to escape from us even if he runs to the ends of the earth. Let's go. The people of the Desolate Ancient Sect should be here soon. Let's go and discuss with them first. Yao Qingshan said as he turned into a beam of light and returned to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Outside the Valley of the Medicine Masters, many warriors and demon gods were bored when they saw Chu Fengmian's sudden departure. They thought that there would be an earth-shattering battle between Chu Fengmian and the Valley of the Medicine Masters. But now, they didn't know what kind of deal Chu Fengmian had made with Yao Qingshan that caused him to leave. However, even more people were aware that this truce was only temporary. The true decisive battle was yet to come. Look, more experts have arrived. Suddenly, someone felt several powerful beams of light descending from the sky. These beams of light didn't stop and landed in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. However, the power that was emitted in an instant was enough to make many people unable to breathe. This aura, it's the experts of the Desolate Ancient Sect. It seems like the 7 major sects are really going to take action. Nonsense, the 7 major sects have dominated the 9 regions for tens of thousands of years. When have they ever suffered such a great loss? That kid seems arrogant now, but he's actually an arrow at the end of its flight. A warrior who had a good relationship with the 7 major sects said coldly. It's almost time for that kid to die. While everyone was conversing, more streaks of light suddenly descended from the sky and landed in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. It's the Guyu Canyon. And the experts of the Alpha Hall. They're all here. The experts of the 7 great sects had once again joined forces after the battle against the Sword Dao sect 10,000 years ago. Of course, Chu Fengmian had no idea what was going on. However, Chu Fengmian could also guess that the 7 major sects were probably thinking of a plan to surround and kill him. What do we do now? Return to the Sword Sect. In the void, Chu Fengmian and the other 2 were shuttling back and forth. Alcade Star Emperor turned his head and said to Chu Fengmian. She could clearly sense that the power of the primordial White Wolf incarnation was about to be depleted. In at most 10 minutes, this incarnation would completely dissipate. At that time, Chu Fengmian would face the fierce encirclement of the 7 great sections. Given the way the 7 great sects did things, they would definitely not let Chu Fengmian grow steadily. The current Chu Fengmian was enough to threaten the 7 great sections. For the 7 great sects, they would spare no expense and use all their trump cards to besiege and kill Chu Fengmian. It seemed that only the Sword Sect could escape this calamity. In the ruins of the Sword Sect, there were a large number of ancient restrictions and formations left. Although most of these restrictions and formations were broken, the power of the Sword Sect was not weak. However, the strength of the Upper Sword Sect back then was not something that the current 9 regions could compare to. Even some incomplete formations could withstand the attacks of an immortal lord. If Chu Fengmian hid in the Sword Sect, it would be difficult for the 7 great sects to attack in a short time. This seemed to be the best choice for Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian had another choice. No, I'm going to the 3 sacred realms. Chu Fengmian said in a deep voice. Going to the 3 sacred realms was something Chu Fengmian had to do. If he did not go to the 3 sacred realms, he would not even be able to break through the Empyrean tribulation. His realm would remain at the half-step Empyrean realm. No matter how many opportunities Chu Fengmian had, if his realm remained stagnant, he would never be able to become a true expert. Now, it seemed that Chu Fengmian was not afraid of the experts of the 7 great sects of the 9 regions. However, Chu Fengmian was not worried about the 9 regions, but the experts of the 9 regions behind them. The upheaval of the 9 regions had become more and more intense. Some small cracks had even appeared in the 9 regions. These cracks were so small that it was difficult to see them with the naked eye. However, a pure and rich spiritual qi could be seen seeping out from them. The spiritual qi was 100 times purer than that of the 9 regions. Behind these cracks should be the 9 regions of heaven. The space between the 9 regions and the 9 regions of heaven was about to be broken. It should not be long before the experts of the 9 regions of heaven came to the 9 regions. At that time, Chu Fengmian would have to face the experts of the 9 regions of heaven. It should be known that Chu Fengmian's master, the master of Sword Dao, an invincible dominator, had died under the siege of the experts of the 9 regions of heaven. In the 9 regions of heaven, there were even immortal venerables and invincible immortal emperors. With Chu Fengmian's current strength, going against them was tantamount to courting death. Even the formation of the Shang Sword sect could not withstand the attack of the immortal venerables or immortal emperors. Chu Fengmian could only hide for a lifetime if he hid in the Shang Sword sect. When the experts of the 9 regions of heaven came, Chu Fengmian would be courting death if he hid in the Shang Sword sect. Therefore, instead of waiting for death, it was better to go to the 3 great sacred regions and let Chu Fengmian break through the realm. With Chu Fengmian's current opportunities, once he broke through the realm and stepped into the Empyrean realm, Chu Fengmian's strength would have a qualitative improvement. At that time, Chu Fengmian would have the capital to fight against the experts of the 9 regions of heaven. Therefore, Chu Fengmian did not plan to hide in the Shang Sword sect, but went directly to the 3 great sacred regions. It's too dangerous for you to go to the 3 great sacred regions with your current situation. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Alcade Star Emperor was taken aback. The 3 great sacred regions were located in a unique area of the endless starry sky. To go to the 3 great sacred regions, one had to pass through the vast uninhabited area of the endless starry sky. In the uninhabited area, there were countless dangers. Even the experts of the Empyrean realm would find it extremely dangerous to pass through it. However, with Chu Fengmian's strength, he was not afraid of these dangers, but the uninhabited area was also the best place to besiege and kill. Chapter 2332. Once Chu Fengmian was besieged in the uninhabited starry sky, he would be doomed. Chu Fengmian's plan was extremely dangerous. Don't worry, I have a way to avoid being besieged. It's enough as long as I'm close to the edge of the 3 saint domains. Chu Fengmian said in a deep voice. His first goal in going to the 3 saint domains was to mobilize the power of heaven and earth to form the Empyrean tribulation so that Chu Fengmian could pass it and step into the Empyrean realm. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, he had already reached the level of triggering the Empyrean tribulation. He only needed to get close to the edge of the 3 saint domains to trigger the tribulation of heaven and earth. Once the tribulation of heaven and earth was triggered, the people of the 7 major sects wouldn't dare to besiege Chu Fengmian under the tribulation thunder. Once Chu Fengmian passed the Empyrean tribulation, the so-called siege of the 7 major sects wouldn't be worth mentioning. At that time, Chu Fengmian's strength would probably be stronger than the immortal monarchs. At that time, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have to worry about the siege of the 7 major sections. What Chu Fengmian needed to be careful about was how to leave the 9 domains. However, the ancient white wolf transformation could still last for about 10 minutes, so Chu Fengmian could still prepare. Chu Fengmian took Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient white wolf into the depths of the void and entered the vicinity of the sword domain. It was an incomparably safe place. The experts of the 7 major sects didn't dare to approach the sword domain rashly. Previously, the experts of the 7 major sects had tried to besiege Chu Fengmian, but they were trapped in the sword domain and killed one by one. They had learned their lesson. Therefore, Chu Fengmian could feel that several powerful auras stopped in the void and didn't dare to approach the sword domain. Alcade, go to the Sword Dao sect and move the sword origin world here. Chu Fengmian came to the sword domain, sat down cross-legged, and said to Alcade Star Emperor. He was going to leave the 9 domains and go to the 3 saint domains. For Chu Fengmian, the most worrying thing was the Sword Dao sect. However, Chu Fengmian had already prepared for how to protect the Sword Dao sect. He moved the Sword Dao sect in the Sword Origin world into the Sword domain. With the protection of the Sword domain array formation, the Sword Dao sect should be safe before the 9 heavens domain barrier completely shattered. Moreover, the main target of the 7 sects was Chu Fengmian, not the Sword Dao sect. If Chu Fengmian wasn't here, the 7 great sects wouldn't have spent so much effort to attack the Sword domain's formation. Although the formation of the Sword domain was incomplete, it was once set up by the Upper Sword sect. Even if a celestial sage rashly attacked it, it would be extremely dangerous. Bringing the Sword Dao sect to the Sword domain could guarantee the safety of the Sword Dao sect for the time being. Here. With a thought, Chu Fengmian condensed the power of heaven and earth in his palm and handed it to Alcade Star Emperor. This power was the power of the Sword Origin boundary. By giving this power to the Alcade Star Emperor, Chu Fengmian meant that the Alcade Star Emperor could control the Sword Origin boundary. Although the Sword Origin boundary was a sacred ground, it was still very weak and hadn't completely taken root in the void. With the Alcade Star Emperor's strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to move the Sword Origin boundary into the Sword domain after controlling the origin of the Sword Origin boundary. This matter should have been done by Chu Fengmian, but he had more important things to do now. Alcade Star Emperor took the power of heaven and earth and set off without asking any questions. The ancient desolate white wolf also went with Alcade Star Emperor to protect him. Although the real target of the 7 great sects was Chu Fengmian, they still had to be careful. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was now in the Sword domain and was protected by the Sword domain array. Even with Chu Fengmian's current strength, he couldn't break the Sword domain array formation. Naturally, the 7 great sects couldn't break it either. It was incomparably safe here, and Chu Fengmian didn't need the ancient desolate white wolf's protection. After Alcade Star Emperor left, Chu Fengmian sat on the ground, closed his eyes, and operated the power of the immortal real body. Chu Fengmian asked Alcade Star Emperor to be in charge of moving the Sword Origin boundary because Chu Fengmian wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to condense the 4th immortal inscription and enhance his strength. Ignoring the prying of the spiritual consciousnesses in the void, Chu Fengmian directly opened the empty ring. Suddenly, the countless essence blood in it was immediately devoured by Chu Fengmian's sky-devouring secret technique. The essence blood of Emperor Wu, Wu Yinling, and the other sage rulers sect martial artists that were originally stored in Chu Fengmian's body were all stimulated. All the essence blood was devoured by the immortal real body and immediately began to condense the 4th ancient inscription. The condensation of the 4th inscription consumed dozens of times more essence blood than the 3rd inscription. However, Chu Fengmian had also gained a lot from the Medicine King Valley. The essence blood that flew out of the empty ring poured into Chu Fengmian's body almost continuously. The embryonic form of the 4th inscription began to condense. Chu Fengmian's immortal real body had not yet reached the limit of improvement. As long as there was enough essence blood, he could condense more inscriptions. As a large amount of essence blood was continuously devoured, the embryonic form of the 4th inscription began to condense. At this moment, Chu Fengmian suddenly opened the empty ring again. An umbrella and a bronze mirror suddenly flew out. These 2 immortal weapons were the ones that Chu Fengmian had obtained from Gong Yangxian. Previously, when Chu Fengmian was condensing the 3rd inscription, it was because he had devoured the Luan flag that he had obtained from Gong Yangxian that the power of the 3rd inscription had skyrocketed and far surpassed the previous 2 inscriptions. The Luan flag had greatly enhanced Chu Fengmian's condensing of the immortal inscription. Chu Fengmian also discovered that the umbrella and the bronze mirror actually had similar power to the Luan flag. Since the Luan flag could be integrated into Chu Fengmian's immortal real body to enhance the power of the inscription, the umbrella and the bronze mirror might have the same effect. The moment the 2 immortal weapons were taken out, the umbrella suddenly turned into a ray of light, just like the Luan flag before, and drilled directly into Chu Fengmian's body. the power of the essence blood was devoured by the immortal real body and condensed into the inscription. It was indeed useful. Chu Fengmian was delighted. He had previously noticed that the power of the Luan flag, the umbrella, and the bronze mirror was almost the same. Now it seemed that they all belonged to the same set of immortal weapons. This set of immortal weapons seemed to have great benefits for the immortal real body. As the umbrella was integrated into Chu Fengmian's body, the power of the inscription skyrocketed, exactly the same as when it had been integrated into the Luan flag. Chapter 2333. The immortal inscription, which was still in its embryonic form, began to solidify with the fusion of the umbrella. Suddenly, the fourth inscription was formed. Chu Fengmian felt his body undergo earth-shattering changes. The 129,600 immortal crystals had changed into many ancient patterns. Chu Fengmian examined the inscription. Suddenly, a surge of power was injected into it. Chu Fengmian's body expanded dozens of times from its normal size, turning into a 10-meter-tall giant. This giant had a pair of wings on its back. Its bronze skin was constantly burning with flames. Chu Fengmian was no stranger to this appearance. It was the bronze heavenly demon. Previously, when Chu Fengmian formed the first inscription and activated its power, he transformed into the bronze heavenly demon. However, this time, Chu Fengmian's bronze heavenly demon was far more powerful than the previous one in terms of power and momentum. It seemed to be closer to the real bronze heavenly demon. What's going on? Will I transform into the bronze heavenly demon when my immortal true body evolves to the end? Chu Fengmian was shocked to see this change. His power didn't increase much after forming the fourth inscription. On the contrary, the 129,600 immortal crystals in his body transformed into many ancient inscriptions. The moment Chu Fengmian activated the inscription, he transformed into the bronze heavenly demon. At the same time, his power was at least 3 times stronger than usual. The evolution of the immortal true body seemed to allow Chu Fengmian to develop into the bronze heavenly demon. This was only the fourth inscription formed by the fourth level of the immortal true body. Chu Fengmian had some doubts. When his immortal true body reached the 5th or 6th level in the future, would he really become a bronze heavenly demon? Chu Fengmian wasn't clear about this change. Even in the memories of the Shang Sword sect, there were no records of this. Chu Fengmian was familiar with the ancient books of the 9 domains, but it seemed that no one in the history of the 9 domains had reached his current level. This made Chu Fengmian unable to understand the mystery of the immortal true body. However, after transforming into the bronze heavenly demon, Chu Fengmian's power had increased 3-fold. This kind of power was much stronger than usual. It was as if this was Chu Fengmian's true form, and his usual appearance was just a disguise. Fortunately, I can still change back. With a thought, Chu Fengmian's appearance returned to his original appearance. This allowed Chu Fengmian to breathe a sigh of relief. If he continued to maintain the appearance of the bronze heavenly demon, it would be troublesome. At the very least, it would be extremely difficult for Chu Fengmian to return to the 9 realms. The Sword Dao sect might not necessarily accept a sect master who looked like one of the 10 heavenly demons. However, being able to change at any time was a good thing for Chu Fengmian. At the very least, it gave Chu Fengmian another trump card. In any case, when facing an enemy, it didn't matter what he looked like. Only strength was truly important. As soon as the 4th deathless inscription was formed, Chu Fengmian saw 2 streaks of light flying back. They were the Alcade Star Emperor and the Desolate White Wolf. They moved extremely quickly and brought the Sword Origin world back with them. Open! Chu Fengmian waved his hand and immediately opened the gate of the Sword Domain, allowing the Alcade Star Emperor and the Desolate White Wolf to enter. Alcade, this is the method to control the formation of the Upper Sword sect. I will temporarily leave the 9 realms. In the future, you will take care of the Sword Dao sect. With a thought, Chu Fengmian condensed a jade talisman and flew in front of the Alcade Star Emperor. I'll go with you. The Alcade Star Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian and couldn't help but say, "No, this time I will go alone." If I leave alone, I can hide my aura to avoid being discovered by the people of the 7 major sections. Chu Fengmian asked the Alcade Star Emperor to be in charge of transferring the Sword Origin world because he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to condense the 4th Deathless inscription and enhance his strength. Regardless of the prying of the spiritual consciousness in the void, Chu Fengmian directly opened the empty ring. Immediately, the countless essence blood in it was swallowed by Chu Fengmian's sky-devouring secret technique. The essence blood of Emperor Wu Yinling, and the other sage ruler sect martial artists that were originally stored in Chu Fengmian's body were all stimulated. All the essence blood was swallowed by the immortal real body and immediately began to condense the 4th ancient inscription. The condensation of the 4th inscription consumed dozens of times more essence blood than the 3rd inscription. However, this time, Chu Fengmian had also gained a lot from the Medicine King Valley. The essence blood that flew out of the empty ring poured into Chu Fengmian's body almost continuously. The embryonic form of the 4th inscription began to condense. Chu Fengmian's immortal real body had not yet reached the limit of improvement. As long as there was enough essence blood, he could condense more inscriptions. As a large amount of essence blood was continuously swallowed, the embryonic form of the 4th inscription began to condense. At this moment, Chu Fengmian suddenly opened the empty ring again. A parasol and a bronze mirror suddenly flew out. These 2 immortal weapons were the ones that Chu Fengmian had obtained from Gongyang Xian. Previously, when Chu Fengmian was condensing the 3rd inscription, it was because he had swallowed the Luan flag that he had obtained from Gongyang Xian that the power of the 3rd inscription had skyrocketed, far surpassing that of the first 2 inscriptions. The Luan flag had greatly enhanced Chu Fengmian's condensing of the immortal inscription. Chu Fengmian also discovered that the parasol and the bronze mirror actually had similar powers as the Luan flag. Since the Luan flag could be integrated into Chu Fengmian's immortal real body to enhance the power of the inscription, the parasol and the bronze mirror might have the same effect. The moment the 2 immortal weapons were taken out, the parasol suddenly turned into a ray of light, like the Luan flag before, and directly drilled into Chu Fengmian's body. The power of the essence blood was swallowed by the immortal real body and condensed into the inscription. It was indeed useful. Chu Fengmian was delighted. He had previously noticed that the power of the Luan flag, the parasol, and the bronze mirror was almost the same. Now it seemed that they all belonged to the same set of immortal weapons. This set of immortal weapons seemed to have great benefits for the immortal real body. As the parasol was integrated into Chu Fengmian's body, the power of the inscription skyrocketed, exactly the same as when it had been integrated into the Luan flag before. Chapter 2334. Chu Fengmian wanted to go to the star cave closest to the 9 domains. However, it was actually a distance of hundreds of star domains away from the 9 domains. Such a distance could only be reached by the star domain teleportation formation. However, Chu Fengmian's identity was special now. The 7 major sects hated him to the core. If he used the star domain teleportation formation, his identity would be exposed. Once the 7 major sects destroyed the star domain teleportation formation, Chu Fengmian would be drawn into the turbulence of the starry sky. According to legend, the star domain teleportation formation was set up by the experts of the 4 great sacred domains in ancient times. Once it was destroyed, Chu Fengmian would not be able to withstand the power of the explosion. If the star domain teleportation formation could not be used, the only thing Chu Fengmian could do was to cross the starry sky and go to the star cave. Although the distance of hundreds of star domains was extremely far, Chu Fengmian's current strength allowed him to cross the starry sky at an extremely fast speed. Especially after he transformed into Ancestor Jianwang, he crossed thousands of miles in an instant. The distance of hundreds of star domains might be impossible for other warriors to cross in their lifetime, but for Chu Fengmian, it would only take some time. Now, Chu Fengmian's strength had truly stepped into the level of a mortal monarch after condensing the 4th immortal inscription. An immortal monarch was almost the strongest expert in the 3 great sacred domains apart from the 9 domains of heaven. Among the existing experts of the 9 domains, the strongest was only at this level. According to the memories in the Sword Emperor crown, an immortal monarch, even in the three great sacred realms, was an existence that could dominate a region. He could be considered a small giant. The immortal sage was an existence that could become a saint or an ancestor. In the three great sacred domains, they could establish their own sect. As for immortal venerables, they were the strongest experts below the immortal emperors. They were invincible overlords. If the immortal emperors didn't appear, immortal venerables were the supreme existences. Of course, there were rumors that there were immortal emperors in the three saint domains. However, immortal emperors rarely appeared in the world for tens of thousands of years, so there were very few people who had seen the Sword Emperor. Unknowingly, the current Chu Fengmian could be considered a figure even in the three great sacred domains. When Chu Fengmian heard of the three sacred realms, he felt that they were mythical existences. But now, Chu Fengmian had also become such a figure. Even the famous giants of the 9 domains, such as Emperor Wu and Gong Yangxian, had died at Chu Fengmian's hands. However, Chu Fengmian's current strength was far from enough to avenge the Sword Dao Master. He had to at least step into the Immortal Emperor realm. Immortal Emperor, soon. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. As long as Chu Fengmian went to the 3 sacred regions, passed the Deva tribulation, and reached the Deva realm, his strength would skyrocket. At that time, he wouldn't be far from the Celestial Emperor realm. So, Chu Fengmian's escape light was extremely fast. The continents and planets in the starry sky were almost instantly passed by Chu Fengmian. In the blink of an eye, Chu Fengmian left the Daluotian star field and went to the next star field. All of this happened in just 1 or 2 minutes. However, at the same time, Chu Fengmian also noticed that behind him, there was an aura that was closely following Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian didn't need to think to know that this aura was definitely from the 7 great sections. The 7 great sects definitely wouldn't let Chu Fengmian go so easily. Chu Fengmian's current strength was enough to easily destroy a sect. Chu Fengmian had broken through 2 sects in a row and obtained countless resources from them. Once Chu Fengmian had a chance to take a breather and devour the resources of these 2 sects, his strength would become even more terrifying. This was the best opportunity to kill Chu Fengmian. They would never let him go. The experts of the 7 great sects seemed to be riding on an immortal artifact Arkansas. Their speed in the starry sky was not inferior to Chu Fengmian's. They were following Chu Fengmian closely. An immortal artifact Arkansas. There are so many good things in the 7 great sections. Seeing that the immortal artifact Ark was not far away and was chasing after him, Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. He originally wanted to use the speed of the conveyance light to completely shake off the experts of the 7 great sections. However, it seemed that the experts of the 7 great sects were not that easy to deal with. The speed of the immortal artifact Ark was even faster than Chu Fengmian's conveyance light. After all, the Ark itself was an immortal artifact used to travel in the starry sky. This Ark was also an immortal artifact. There were many Space Dao inscriptions engraved on the Arkansas. In the starry sky, the speed of martial artists and demon gods was far from comparable to the Arkansas. Even though Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of primogenitor Jianwang and had an extreme control over the Space Dao, he was still slower than the immortal artifact Arkansas. However, the immortal artifact Ark seemed to have deliberately slowed down and was following behind Chu Fengmian for a few thousand kilometers. The power of the primordial White Wolf's incarnation is about to dissipate. Let's catch up and kill this person now. There were a total of 7 figures sitting in the immortal artifact Arkansas. These 7 figures each contained an extremely terrifying power. Any one of them was no weaker than Emperor Wu and Gong Yangxian. These 7 figures were all peak immortal kings. Among the 7 great sects, the experts of the Tianjian sect and the Sage Ruler sect had all been killed by Chu Fengmian. The remaining 7 peak immortal kings were almost all the experts of the remaining 5 great sections. Among these 7 figures, there were both young and old. Chu Fengmian had seen some of them before. The Valley Master of the Medicine King Valley, Yao Qingshan, was among them. He stood aside and looked at Chu Fengmian with murderous eyes. He was the one who had spoken just now. Chu Fengmian had extorted a large amount of elixirs and blood essence from the Medicine King Valley. Yao Qingshan could not wait to kill Chu Fengmian. Now that he had finally found the opportunity, he could no longer suppress the murderous intent in his heart. There's no hurry. Let's wait a little longer. A young man sat on the main seat and spoke slowly. This immortal artifact arc belonged to him. If Chu Fengmian was here, he would be able to recognize this young man at a glance. He was the sect master of the Six Paths Demonic Gate, the Demon Emperor. Back in the Nine Regions Genius Battle, the Demon Emperor was defeated by Chu Fengmian. All of his incarnations were killed by Chu Fengmian, causing his Nirvana divine body to be completely destroyed. However, the Demon Emperor had another opportunity. The rise of the Six Paths Demonic Gate was not a coincidence. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Six Paths Demonic Gate had already planned this. His current strength had already reached the peak of the Immortal King realm and was unfathomable. Although he looked like a young man, no one dared to underestimate the Demon Emperor. Chapter 2335. Demon Emperor, what do you mean? An old man standing at the side slowly looked at the Demon Emperor and said. Although this old man looked old, his vitality was incomparably exuberant. He was still in the prime of his life, far from the point where he was like an oil lamp that had run out of oil. This old appearance was just a facade that he had deliberately put on. The old man was wearing a long robe that was dotted with stars. This long robe seemed to be formed by the stars in the sky. The stars in the robe were changing, and a huge amount of power of the stars shrouded the old man's body. This robe was called the Star Robe, and it was an immortal artifact. The invincible expert of Dubhe Palace once absorbed hundreds of stars in the sky and refined them into a long robe. This Star Robe was the sect-guarding immortal artifact of Dubhe Palace. There was only one person who could wear this Star Robe, and that was the Star Lord of Dubhe Palace. This time, Dubhe Palace also sent out all the experts, including the Star Lord who hadn't made a move for 10,000 years, to besiege Chu Fengmian. The Star Lord spoke in a very polite tone. He didn't treat the Demon Emperor as a junior, but as someone who was on equal footing with them. Don't be in a hurry to make a move. Anyway, this person has a mark on his body, so he can't escape from our hands. Since he wants to escape, let him run as far away as possible. It can also exhaust his strength. Demon Emperor said slowly. When he mentioned Chu Fengmian, the Demon Emperor's tone revealed a bone-chilling killing intent. His hatred for Chu Fengmian had been engraved in his bones. Unless Chu Fengmian died, it would never be resolved. Demon Emperor inherited the inheritance of Six-Path Demon Gates and was originally invincible, but he didn't expect to encounter Chu Fengmian and suffer setbacks everywhere. Even Six-Path Demon Gates had been attacked by Chu Fengmian. It wasn't because Demon Emperor had the Nirvana divine body, but because he was going to die in Chu Fengmian's hands. He hated Chu Fengmian to the core. Do we need to be so cautious? It's easy for us 7 peak immortal kings to besiege and kill this person. Hearing the Demon Emperor's words, another middle-aged man beside him spoke. This middle-aged man stood there, but he seemed to be thousands of miles away, in an illusory state. This state was the state where one cultivated the great Tao of the Desolate Era to the pinnacle. This middle-aged man was called Huang Tiangang. He was the previous sect leader of the Barren Ancient Sect. At the same time, he was also the current sect leader of the Barren Ancient Sect, the master of Heavenly King Huang. The warriors of the 9 domains had all heard of Heavenly King Huang, but few knew that he had an even more terrifying master. As soon as he spoke, there was a hint of disdain in his tone. Even if he is a true immortal monarch, the 7 of us at the peak of the Immortal King realm would be able to deal with him if we join forces. Let alone this brat, he isn't even a true immortal monarch. It's extremely easy for us to kill him. Huang Tiangang, don't underestimate him. Don't underestimate his Tianjian sect. The Sage Monarch sect has been destroyed. You have to be careful when dealing with him. The Demon Emperor said after hearing Huang Tiangnang's words. Among all the people present, he was the only one who had truly fought with Chu Fengmian. In the past, the Demon Emperor had not taken Chu Fengmian seriously, but he had paid a huge price for it. This made the Demon Emperor extremely cautious this time. The Demon Emperor is right. That lad is extremely sinister. Ever since he appeared out of nowhere, he has resolved countless of life and death crises. Not only that, in just a few short years, he has grown to such a horrifying extent. Even his revered master, the master of Sword Dao, did not have such a frightening figure. We have to be careful when dealing with this brat. Seize the opportunity and kill him in one strike. Don't give him any chance. Another figure standing beside Huang Tiangang spoke. This figure was also a middle-aged man. His appearance, clothes, and mannerisms were very similar to Huang Tiangang. However, compared to Huang Tiangang's overbearing demeanor, Yi Futian's demeanor was more reserved. Huang Tsanggu. This man who looked very similar to Huang Tiangang was the oldest supreme elder of the Barren Ancient Sect. He was so old that many elders of the Barren Ancient Sect did not know that there was such a person in the Barren Ancient Sect. Even fewer people knew that Huang Tsanggu was Huang Tiangang's elder brother. On the surface, Huang Tiangang was the leader of the Barren Ancient Sect, but in reality, there was another peak immortal king. Among the 7 major sects of the 9 regions, most of them only had one peak immortal king expert. The Sword Principal sect was the strongest among the 7 major sects, but they only had 3. However, the Barren Ancient sect had 2 of them. This time, in order to deal with Chu Fengmian, the only 2 peak immortal king experts of the Barren Ancient sect had joined forces. Indeed, we cannot underestimate this person. Our ancient Moon Valley has also suffered greatly at his hands. The Valley Master of the ancient Moon Valley, Dao Yue, also spoke. Since this brat is already in our bag this time, it's better to be careful. After the experts discussed for a while, they stopped talking. They decided to follow Chu Fengmian for a while and exhaust his strength before deciding what to do next. They had also easily found out about Chu Fengmian's previous experiences. Chu Fengmian's methods were endless, so much so that Chu Fengmian was able to escape from dead-end situations time and time again. This time, in order to deal with Chu Fengmian, the remaining experts of the 5 major sects had all come out. This time, they could not afford to fail. Therefore, they decided to be extremely cautious. This immortal artifact arc had followed Chu Fengmian through star domain after star domain. It had been following Chu Fengmian for thousands of miles. If you are willing to follow, then follow. Chu Fengmian also noticed this, and his lips curled into a cold smile. The ancient white wolf's incarnation had already dissipated, and now only Chu Fengmian was left, traversing the starry sky. However, even so, the experts of the 7 major sects in the immortal artifact arc still had no intention of attacking. You want to exhaust my strength? At the same time, Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness quietly entered the immortal artifact Arkansas. Chu Fengmian heard the conversation in the immortal artifact Arkansas. Chu Fengmian was not surprised that the Demon Emperor was so cautious this time. After all, the Demon Emperor had almost died in Chu Fengmian's hands last time. The Demon Emperor's idea was not bad. Traversing the starry sky would exhaust a lot of strength for any martial artist or demon god. However, Chu Fengmian was an extremely special one. He had a divine pulse that could continuously replenish his strength. Not to mention traversing 100 star domains, 1,000, or even 10,000, Chu Fengmian's strength would not weaken in the slightest. The Demon Emperor's wishful thinking was probably going to fail. Chapter 2336. Chu Fengmian's escape light quickly traversed one star field after another. Even Chu Fengmian was unfamiliar with the nearby star fields. Many of the memories in the Sword Emperor crown came from tens of millions of years ago. In these tens of millions of years, many earth-shaking changes had occurred in these star fields. Some of the originally desolate star fields had become prosperous due to various changes. There were also some once prosperous star fields that had completely declined and become dead regions in these tens of millions of years. In such a dead star field, almost no one was willing to set foot in it except for some martial artists and demon gods who were hiding from their enemies. Even Chu Fengmian found it unfamiliar through the memories of the Sword Emperor crown. However, Chu Fengmian was indeed flying in the direction of the star hole. The star hole was a unique area created by the collision of two huge spaces. Even an immortal emperor couldn't affect the power of the star hole. Even after tens of millions of years, the starry sky outside the domain would have undergone countless changes. However, the star hole would still be there. In one day, Chu Fengmian had traversed the distance of 10 star fields. If this speed was spread out, it would be extremely shocking. Even if an ordinary martial artist traveled with an arc, it would take several years to traverse the distance of 10 star fields. Now, Chu Fengmian's physical body had traversed 10 star fields in just one day's time. Chu Fengmian had deliberately slowed down a little. Otherwise, it might be even more exaggerated. The Demon Emperor and the others were now hiding in the Immortal Artifact Arc and following Chu Fengmian. They weren't in a hurry to attack. After all, they were sitting in the Arc and didn't need to traverse the starry sky with their physical bodies like Chu Fengmian. Controlling the Arc only required immortal stones. Each of them was an ancestor-like figure in the 7 great sections. No one lacked immortal stones. They were happy to see Chu Fengmian consume his energy like this. No one was anxious. On the contrary, they now hoped that Chu Fengmian would escape for a few more days. It would be best if Chu Fengmian ran until his energy was exhausted. Then, they would attack and kill Chu Fengmian directly to avoid trouble. He can cross 10 star regions in one day. This kid sure knows how to escape. Without this immortal artifact, we might not be able to catch up to him. Within the Immortal Artifact Arc, Yao Qingshan could not help but stare at Chu Fengmian. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Traversing the starry sky with his physical body at such a speed was something he knew he couldn't achieve. This person has the bloodline of primogenitor Jianwang. His control of the Tao of space is not inferior to yours or mine. It's not strange for him to have such a light. When you want to deal with him, you have to seal the space. Otherwise, he can escape in the blink of an eye. Another expert, Huang Tiangang of the Desolate Ancient Sect, spoke. While they were following Chu Fengmian, they had already begun to formulate a plan. They decided that once they attacked, they would kill Chu Fengmian without giving him any chance to survive. Ancestor Tianlong's bloodline. I wonder where this person got such a fortuitous encounter. Hearing this, Star Sovereign snorted coldly. There was a hint of jealousy in his tone. The more they saw of Chu Fengmian's fortuitous encounter, the more jealous they became. The inheritance of the Upper Sword Sect and the bloodline of the 3 great innate divine beasts. Any one of these was enough to make immortal kings and immortal lords go crazy. Now, they had all fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands. Brother Star Sovereign, don't worry. Once we kill this person, all the benefits on him will belong to us. This kid's fortuitous encounter is just a wedding dress for us. Dao Weiyue of the ancient Moon Canyon also spoke. There was a hint of greed in his tone. He was willing to join forces with others to besiege Chu Fengmian because of Chu Fengmian's fortuitous encounter. I wonder where that brat is trying to escape to. Huang Canggu looked in Chu Fengmian's direction with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Chu Fengmian moved forward without changing his direction. At first, he guessed that Chu Fengmian might be going to some danger zone to shake them off. But looking at Chu Fengmian, it didn't seem to be the case. There were countless danger zones in outer space. Many of them were so dangerous that even celestial realm experts would have no chance of survival if they entered them. There were even some extremely dangerous danger zones that even immortal marquis and immortal kings wouldn't dare to recklessly enter. However, Chu Fengmian had already passed by 3 of these extremely dangerous danger zones, but he didn't enter any of them. Obviously, it was different from what he had guessed. No matter where he goes, whether he has help or not, this kid is dead. What's there to be afraid of? I think he's just stalling for time and wants to live for a few more days. Huang Tiangang sneered. Just keep a close eye on him. Demon Emperor also said. Everyone's spiritual consciousness shrouded Chu Fengmian's head without concealing it. They didn't want to lose him. Chu Fengmian didn't pay any attention to the probing of these people's spiritual senses. His attention was completely focused on the empty ring as he observed the pool within it. The pool was filled with aqua lazuli. A spiritual sword and a heart were soaked in it. An endless stream of demonic will was being refined from the pool. At every moment, the demonic will in the spiritual sword and the heart was being refined by the aqua lazuli in the pool. The spiritual sword was the primordial sword, one of the 4 extreme immortal weapons that once belonged to the first Sword Emperor. As for the heart, it was the heart of Demon Emperor Bloodlust. Chu Fengmian had taken these 2 treasures from the Sword Dao sect when he left the 9 realms. Ever since Chu Fengmian returned from the Cunhai Starfield and brought back a large amount of aqua lazuli, he had been soaking them in the aqua lazuli to dispel the demonic will within. More than half of the demonic will in the primordial sword had been dispelled. When Chu Fengmian had gone to the upper sword sect ruins, only half of the demonic will had been left. After these days, less than 20% of the demonic will remained. Chu Fengmian deliberately slowed down to the star cave to buy time and wait for the demonic will on the primordial sword to be completely dispelled. The primordial sword was an extreme immortal weapon. Although it had been broken, the power it contained was far more powerful than an immortal weapon. Chu Fengmian had only obtained more than half of the fragments of the Mortal Emperor jar, but he could already explode with terrifying power. Moreover, although the primordial sword had been broken, Chu Fengmian had obtained both its blade and hilt. While soaking in the aqua lazuli to dispel the demonic will, Chu Fengmian also pieced the blade and hilt of the primordial sword back together. Chapter 2337. It was different from the Emperor Jar. The spirit of the Taichu sword, Elder Fan, still existed. As such, Chu Fengmian would be able to control the Taichu sword as long as he dispelled all of its demonic will. Especially since Chu Fengmian himself was a sword cultivator. The Emperor Jar was still missing a part, so it could only form the Emperor Spear and Emperor Halberd. As for the Emperor Sword, it couldn't be formed yet. Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship couldn't be used when he used the Emperor Jar, so he could only rely on the jar's power to fight. However, the Taichu sword was a spiritual sword at the level of an extreme immortal weapon. In Chu Fengmian's hands, it could unleash its greatest power. To a sword cultivator, a spiritual sword was just as important as the way of the sword. A powerful spiritual sword could also increase a sword cultivator's strength by countless times. The most powerful spiritual sword was an extreme immortal armament spiritual sword, the Absolute Primordium Sword. As long as he had the Taichu sword, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be afraid even if he was surrounded by 7 immortal kings. That was where Chu Fengmian's confidence came from. Especially this time, the Demon Emperor and the others wanted to exhaust Chu Fengmian's strength, so they weren't willing to use their phones immediately. This was exactly what Chu Fengmian wanted. Chu Fengmian deliberately slowed down to buy time to dispel the sword will on the Taichu sword. The Taichu sword was immersed in the pool, and the demonic will it contained was being dispelled at every moment. Elder Fan, how much longer do you need? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked the Taichu sword in the pool as he flew across the starry sky, but his attention was on the spatial ring. About 7 more days. Elder Fan's voice was soon heard from the Taichu sword. In order to speed up the process of dispelling the demonic will on the Taichu sword, Elder Fan returned to the sword. 7 days should be enough. Chu Fengmian's heart was filled with joy. However, he still looked anxious, as if he was anxious to shake off the pursuit behind him, but had no way to do so. Seeing Chu Fengmian like this, the cultivators of the 7 great sects in the arc behind him were even happier. The more anxious Chu Fengmian was, the more it proved that he was forcing himself to hold on, and the less anxious they were. In any case, with the immortal artifact arc, Chu Fengmian would not be able to escape even if he grew wings. They could slowly deal with Chu Fengmian. They were all people who had lived for tens of thousands of years. They had plenty of patience. Let alone a day, they could chase for a year, or even 10 years. As long as they could kill Chu Fengmian, they didn't care. Time passed day by day. Chu Fengmian traversed one starfield after another. Almost every day, he could traverse about 10 starfields. The Immortal Artifact Arc followed closely behind. Over the past few days, Chu Fengmian had also pretended that his spiritual power was about to run out. He pretended to swallow a few immortal pills to recover his immortal power. Although Chu Fengmian had divine veins and could constantly replenish his energy, flying like this would not consume much of Chu Fengmian's energy. However, in order to deceive the Devil Emperor and the others, Chu Fengmian deliberately pretended that he was replenishing his energy. As the days passed, Chu Fengmian swallowed pills to replenish his strength more frequently. Looks like this kid won't be able to hold on any longer. No matter how many immortal pills he has, he still needs time to refine them. Swallowing them like this will only restore less than 10% of his energy. The experts on the Immortal Artifact Arc stared at Chu Fengmian with ferocious eyes. When Chu Fengmian truly couldn't hold on any longer and exhausted his spiritual power, it would be time for them to attack. Another 2 days passed. It was already the 8th day since Chu Fengmian left the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian continued to fly as usual. However, all of a sudden, Chu Fengmian's body trembled, as if he had encountered something. Although it was only for a moment, this scene was immediately observed by everyone on the Immortal Artifact Arkansas. Good, this person's energy is finally about to run out. To be able to fly at full speed for 8 days, this person's energy is really incomparably strong. If we had attacked from the beginning, this kid might have really escaped. Yao Qingshan, Huang Canggu, and the others looked at Chu Fengmian with deep fear. With their strength, if they were to fly at full speed like Chu Fengmian, their immortal power would be exhausted in 3 or 4 days at most. Now, Chu Fengmian had lasted for a full 8 days. This also proved that Chu Fengmian's energy was more than twice as strong as a Pinnacle Immortal King expert. It was no wonder that Chu Fengmian had a record of killing several Pinnacle Immortal King experts. It's about time. Get ready to attack. The Demon Emperor stared at Chu Fengmian and finally said coldly. For the past few days, he had also been watching Chu Fengmian, watching as Chu Fengmian's energy gradually began to deplete. Today was the day when Chu Fengmian's energy was at its weakest. It was the best time for them to attack. Let's follow the plan. Huang Tiangang said. Dao Weiyue, Huang Canggu, Star Emperor, and the others all nodded. Waves of killing intent had already descended on Chu Fengmian's head. Can't wait to attack already? The moment the killing intent descended, Chu Fengmian keenly felt it. The moment the Demon Emperor, Huang Tiangang, and the others' killing intent descended, they were almost undisguised. If they wanted to kill Chu Fengmian, there was no need for any concealment. Moreover, with their strength, once their killing intent descended, it was enough to affect an entire planet. It was very difficult to conceal it. Moreover, today, they didn't need to hide anything at all. However, Chu Fengmian's expression was incomparably calm. Even his eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. Just now, the last demonic intent on the Taichu sword was also dissolved by the colored glaze clean water. The influence of the evil blood demon emperor on the Taichu sword had completely disappeared, and the Taichu sword had recovered its original power. Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly paused just now because of this matter. The recovery of the Taichu sword had almost given Chu Fengmian his greatest trump card. With this trump card, even if there were 7 Pinnacle Immortal King experts, Chu Fengmian didn't have the slightest fear. Since you want to attack, then let's do it now. But we need a good place. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian's escape light sped up. This speed was 3 to 4 times faster than usual. Like a ray of starlight, he immediately disappeared into the outer space, disappearing without a trace in an instant. He's trying to escape. He's already at the end of his tether. He should be using his last burst of strength to escape. Chase after him. We can't let him escape. Chapter 2338. The various powerhouses in the Immortal Artifact Arc shouted anxiously as they stared in the direction Chu Fengmian had escaped. They had spent so many days waiting for the moment Chu Fengmian's strength was exhausted before they besieged him. they could not let Chu Fengmian escape just like that. Don't worry. This person can't escape. A confident sneer appeared on Yao Qingshan's face. He waved his hand and a water mirror suddenly condensed in front of him. Chu Fengmian's figure appeared in the water mirror. When Chu Fengmian had asked for the elixir and blood essence, Yao Qingshan had already left a mark in the empty ring. No matter how far Chu Fengmian had gone, Yao Qingshan could accurately find his location. It seems like he has entered the star-sinking continent. Looking at the scene shown in the mirror, Huang Tiangang looked around and recognized where Chu Fengmian was. The old ancestors of the 9 regions had some understanding of the extraterritorial starry sky. On the contrary, they had traveled to the extraterritorial starry sky before. They had heard of many perilous lands in the extraterritorial starry sky and had even explored them personally. The star-sinking continent was one of the most famous perilous lands in the extraterritorial starry sky. It was extremely dark, and there was a huge attractive force in the center of the star-sinking continent. Any planet close to the star-sinking continent could be pulled in by this attractive force and become a part of the star-sinking continent. Because of this, it was called the star-sinking continent. The star-sinking continent was extremely dangerous. Even Sky Realm powerhouses dared not enter it rashly. In addition, there were no treasures in the star-sinking continent. As a result, there were very few people, and no one was willing to enter it. After all, no one was willing to take such a huge risk and explore a place without any benefits. The countless perilous lands in the extraterritorial starry sky were divided into 2 types. One type was dangerous, but it contained treasures. Generally speaking, martialists would still be willing to enter such a perilous land. As for the others, they were like the star-sinking continent. There were no treasures in them. Stepping into them was akin to courting death. When encountering such a perilous land, ordinary martialists would keep a respectful distance and would not approach it rashly. However, Yao Qingshan's water mirror showed that Chu Fengmian had entered the star-sinking continent. Chase after them. I've explored this star-sinking continent before. The attraction force inside is not dangerous to us at all. This kid wants to escape into it. Clearly, he's already exhausted and doesn't have any strength left to escape. That's why he chose to hide in the star-sinking continent. Let's go over and kill him. It'll be easy. Dao Yue snorted coldly. Although star-sinking continent was extremely dangerous for celestial realm warriors, they were all invincible experts at the peak of Immortal King Realm. He could kill a celestial realm cultivator with a puff of his breath. Naturally, he did not take the sinking star continent seriously. Go! When Demon Emperor heard this, he immediately took out a large number of immortal stones and threw them into the immortal artifact Arkansas. The immortal artifact arc began to burn. Suddenly, the immortal artifact arc's speed was pushed to the limit. In an instant, it rushed towards the direction of the star-sink continent. On the other side. In the star-sinking continent. The entire star-sinking continent was covered in darkness. Occasionally, one could see large pits on the ground. These large pits were caused by many meteorites that were close to the star-sinking continent. They were attracted and smashed down. In the entire star-sinking continent, other than that unique attraction, there was almost nothing of value. No wonder this place was deserted all year round. However, Chu Fengmian chose to enter the star-sinking continent this time because he wanted to find a quiet place to make his move. The starry sky outside the domain was vast and boundless. Even Chu Fengmian did not dare to be sure. Would there be some extremely powerful old antiques hidden in some corners? Therefore, if he wanted to make his move, he had to choose a quiet place to avoid being taken advantage of and giving the benefits to others for free. As expected, they've all caught up. Chu Fengmian's spirit sense spread out and enveloped almost the entire star-sinking continent. That immortal artifact arc had just approached the star-sinking continent when it was discovered by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian also knew that although the star-sinking continent was dangerous, it was nothing to the Demon Emperor and the others. They would definitely chase after Chu Fengmian once they found out his location. Seeing this, the corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curved into a smile. If these people did not chase after him, it would be troublesome for Chu Fengmian. This time, it was not only the Demon Emperor and the others who wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had no intention of letting them go. If these people were allowed to leave and return to the 9 domains, they would be a great threat to the Sword Dao sect. It would be better to use this opportunity to kill them all and kill the strongest of the 7 sects in one fell swoop. After killing them, the 7 sects would only have a few ordinary immortal kings left. With the Alcade Star Emperor in charge, ordinary immortal kings would not be a threat to the Sword Dao sect. Originally, Chu Fengmian only wanted to escape unscathed. However, as the Taichu sword recovered, Chu Fengmian changed his plan. Elder Fan, how much power can the Taichu sword unleash now? Chu Fengmian asked Elder Yun in his mind. The Taichu sword had dissolved the demonic will and burrowed into Chu Fengmian's body. The ultimate immortal weapon could now turn invisible and merge into Chu Fengmian's body. As long as it did not activate its power, no one would be able to detect the slightest abnormality. The Taichu sword has just recovered, so it can only use about 50% of its power for the time being. Elder Fan quickly responded. As the weapon spirit of the Taichu sword, he was well aware of the sword's current state. About 50% of its power is enough. Chu Fengmian sneered when he heard the result, killing intent flashing in his eyes. The Demon Emperor and the others had chased after Chu Fengmian for so long. It was time to settle the score. Chu Fengmian stood on a mountain peak in the Star-Sink continent. Rays of sword light suddenly scattered from beneath his feet. These rays of sword light were none other than Supreme Sword Aura. 2,815 rays of Supreme Sword Aura scattered and immediately formed a Supreme Sword formation around Chu Fengmian. Rumble! Just as Chu Fengmian finished setting up the formation, a powerful force suddenly descended from the sky. 7 figures descended from the sky like a string of 7 stars. Every single one of the 7 figures contained a terrifying amount of power, and the moment they descended together, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. The moment they descended, the Star-Sink continent seemed to shake. Chapter 2339. 7 Peak Stage Immortal Kings. Other than the former 4 Great Saint domains, only the current 9 domains had such a lineup. Any one of them could easily wipe out a star domain. Now that all of them had descended on the star continent, the entire star continent was shaken. The 7 figures descended and stood in the air, surrounding Chu Fengmian on the mountain peak. Each of them had a different aura, but the only thing they had in common was that each of them contained a terrifying killing intent. Every single one of them had come today to kill Chu Fengmian. Demon Emperor, Yao Qingshan, Huang Tiangang, Huang Sangu, Dao Yue, Star Emperor. Oh? There's even the Extreme Demon Emperor? Chu Fengmian glanced at them. These people were all old acquaintances of Chu Fengmian. 10,000 years ago, they were all invincible experts among the 7 great sects. They were also the main force that attacked the Sword Dao sect. Only when Chu Fengmian's gaze fell on the last person did Chu Fengmian's eyes reveal a hint of surprise. The last person was an old man who had been following the Demon Emperor. Previously in the Immortal Artifact Arc, this person had been standing beside the Demon Emperor without speaking, so Chu Fengmian didn't see through him. Now that he was standing in front of Chu Fengmian finally recognized him. It was actually the Extreme Demon Emperor. Tens of thousands of years ago, when the 6 Paths Demon sect was still at its peak, one of the invincible Demon Emperors was unexpectedly still alive after tens of thousands of years. It was no wonder that the Demon Emperor could rise so quickly and the 6 Paths Demon sect could replace the former 9 Demon City as one of the 7 great sects. It turned out that the Demon Emperor not only obtained the inheritance of the 6 Paths Demon sect, but also a group of old antiques of the 6 Paths Demon sect. This person was someone who had lived for tens of thousands of years, even more ancient than Huang Tiangang, Star Emperor, Yao Qingshan, and the others. It's just a false reputation. Now, I'm just the Heavenly Demon Supreme Lord of the 6 Paths Demon sect. The Extreme Demon Emperor glanced at Chu Fengmian and said indifferently. Kid, you're about to die, but you're not panicking? The middle-aged man standing on the left of Chu Fengmian, Huang Tiangang, suddenly looked at Chu Fengmian and sneered. Or have you already decided how you're going to die today? Chu Jianbai, you didn't expect it either, did you? You just got so many benefits from my Medicine King Valley, and now you're going to obediently spit them out. Yao Qingshan looked at Chu Fengmian with boundless anger. Previously, in order to get Chu Fengmian to leave on his own accord, they had accepted the harsh conditions that Chu Fengmian had put forward. This was something that had never been done in the history of the Valley of the Medicine Masters, nor had it ever been encountered before. It could be said to be a disgrace. If they did not kill Chu Fengmian, the Valley of the Medicine Masters would not be able to raise its head in the 9 regions. Yao Qingshan, I had originally planned to let Medicine King Valley off the hook for now. I didn't expect you to come and seek your own death. Chu Fengmian looked at Yao Qingshan and said calmly. Chu Jianbai, the small sacred tree in the sacred tree secret realm of the Medicine King Valley was also stolen by you. Huang Sangu suddenly said to Chu Fengmian. Not bad. Hearing Huang Sangu's question, Chu Fengmian didn't hide anything. With his current strength, there was no need to hide anything anymore. In any case, Chu Fengmian had no intention of letting any of these people off today. Even if the sacred tree was exposed, it wouldn't matter. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had activated the sacred tree when he was in the 9 regions. Others might not know the origin of the sacred tree, but Huang Sangu definitely knew. After all, the sacred tree that Chu Fengmian possessed was obtained from the sacred tree secret realm of the desolate ancient sect. As Chu Fengmian spoke, an enormous divine tree appeared behind him. Although the divine tree was only a shadow, Chu Fengmian was still able to see through it. It was tens of thousands of feet tall and soared into the sky. Even from hundreds of miles away, one could clearly see the sacred tree's appearance and the terrifying power it contained. It really is a sacred tree. And it has already grown to such an extent. When Huang Sangu looked at the sacred tree behind Chu Fengmian, his eyes were filled with burning greed. The sacred tree that the desolate ancient sect had obtained previously was already a fully grown sacred tree. However, a fully grown sacred tree was no longer something that could be controlled by human strength. Therefore, Huang Sangu had deliberately split off a part of it and turned it into a small sacred tree. Originally, Huang Sangu had wanted to integrate the small sacred tree into his body so that his strength could take another step forward and surpass the immortal king realm to become an immortal lord. However, he had never expected that Chu Fengmian would secretly steal it. Everything had become a wedding dress for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had never expected that he would grow to such an extent through a chance encounter. If it weren't for the sacred tree, Chu Fengmian would have died countless times. Chu Jianbai, take the initiative to separate the sacred tree from your body and hand over all your fortuitous encounters. If you do, I can give you a quick death. Huang Sangu carefully sized up the sacred tree behind Chu Fengmian before speaking coldly to Chu Fengmian. Oh? Give me a quick death? Chu Fengmian smiled when he heard Huang Sangu's words. I'm afraid that even if you agree, there will be others who won't. As Chu Fengmian spoke, he looked in the direction of the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian with murderous intent. His face was extremely ferocious as he grinned maliciously. That's right, Chu Fengmian. You have some self-awareness. Today, I won't let you die so easily. You destroyed my Nirvana divine body. Today, I will destroy everything that belongs to you bit by bit. I will make you beg for death. I will let you live and let you see with your own eyes how your sword Dao sect will be destroyed. I will see how everyone around you will be tortured to death. Ever since the 9 regions genius battle, the Demon Emperor's heart had been filled with resentment. He wanted to tear Chu Fengmian into pieces and torture him to death. If he let Chu Fengmian die so easily, it would be too easy for Chu Fengmian. That's right. Unfortunately, you won't be able to do all this even in your dreams. When Chu Fengmian heard the Demon Emperor's words, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. Since you've said your piece, you can all go to hell. Do you think that you've already defeated me today? What a joke. I'm just deliberately luring you all here. Today, none of the 7 of you will leave here alive. Rumble. Just as Chu Fengmian spoke, the sword intent on Chu Fengmian's body suddenly erupted. Chu Fengmian pulled out 2 swords and held them in his hands. Chapter 2340. The moment Chu Fengmian held the 2 swords in his hands, his aura was completely different. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's body was suddenly shrouded by a force. Under this force, Chu Fengmian's body grew bigger and bigger. Billowing demonic will gathered behind Chu Fengmian's back and turned into a pair of wings. He turned into a giant that was dozens of meters tall. The giant's skin was not like flesh, but a bronze color with raging flames burning on it. Boundless energy emanated from his body. It was similar to the demonic will, but it was even stronger than the demonic will. The ancestral dragon supreme sword and titanic crescent godly sword both enlarged and fell into Chu Fengmian's palm. Your power? How is it possible? How can you still have such power? Seeing Chu Fengmian's sudden change, Star Emperor, Desolate Big Dipper, Dao Wuyue, and the others did not expect that Chu Fengmian, who they thought was already at the end of his tether, would still have such great power. They thought that Chu Fengmian was definitely going to die this time, but they did not expect that there would be such a change. Especially now that Chu Fengmian had turned into a bronze heavenly demon, his strength was much more terrifying than before. This was the first time Star Emperor and the others had seen this. This was very similar to demonization, but there were some differences. Demon Emperor, do you know about this demonization technique? Star Emperor and the others hurriedly looked at Demon Emperor and asked. In terms of demonization techniques, the 6 demon sects were the best in the entire 9 regions. But now, Demon Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian with a frown. Even he could not see through the changes in Chu Fengmian's body. This is not a technique of the demon sects. Not a technique of the demon sects? Hearing Demon Emperor's words, many people were shocked. They thought that Chu Fengmian must have learned the demonization secret technique from somewhere. Yet, the Demon Emperor denied it outright. Even though Chu Fengmian's current appearance seemed to be demonized, the Demon Emperor could tell at a glance that there was something fundamentally different about him. No matter what technique this kid has, no matter how powerful he is, he's only a half step to celestial realm. With the 7 of us working together, we can deal with him. That's right. With the 7 of us attacking together, even a celestial lord would die without a doubt. This brat is nothing. Kill. This person has a lot of secrets. Once we kill him, all of his secrets will belong to us. At that time, our strength will be able to take another step forward. Star Emperor, Desolate Tiangang, Demon Emperor, and the others shouted coldly. Hearing this, there was no hesitation in the eyes of the others. The 7 of them were at the pinnacle of the immortal king realm. Killing Chu Fengmian was a piece of cake for them. Exterminating the world with poison. Yao Qingshan let out a long roar and took the lead to attack. In an instant, waves of toxic miasma were emitted from his body. To an alchemist, their strongest weapon was poison. As an alchemist grandmaster, they were all experts in refining poison pills. As soon as Yao Qingshan made his move, he crushed dozens of poisonous pills. Highly toxic miasma flew out. Under his control, it transformed into a ferocious poisonous dragon in the air and roared towards Chu Fengmian. Humph! Seeing the poisonous dragon flying towards Chu Fengmian just sneered. On his body, the burning flames suddenly surged. The poisonous dragon was burned to ashes by the flames just as it approached Chu Fengmian. The poison contained in it was burned to ashes. Not a single bit could get close to Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian transformed into the bronze heavenly demon. The burning flames seemed to have become part of Chu Fengmian's body and could be controlled at will. Originally, Chu Fengmian had cultivated the arts of 5 Chaos Emperors and condensed the divine body of ice and fire. He had extremely high attainments in the way of controlling fire. Now, the burning flames on Chu Fengmian's body were controlled by Chu Fengmian at will. balls of flames flew out and transformed into several huge fire dragons. They roared and rushed towards Yao Qingshan. Wherever the fire dragons flew, the space was roasted by the scorching flames and exploded. The fire dragons erupted with raging flames. Their target was not only Yao Qingshan, but also everyone. Desolation Great Tao. Suddenly, just as the flames engulfed everything, a great Tao suddenly appeared under everyone's feet. This great Tao seemed to be an invisible wall. It enveloped everyone present. No matter how ferocious the flames were, they were unable to reach the crowd. Everyone who stepped into the desolate ancient great path was in a state of illusion. The desolate celestial star and the desolate bones desolate ancient great path had been cultivated to the pinnacle. They could use the desolate ancient power to block all attacks. It was not only the desolate celestial star and desolate bone who attacked. The Star Emperor, Dao Weiyue, and the Extreme Demon Emperor also attacked. Every star in the Star Emperor's star robe shone brightly. Countless stars gathered in the Star Emperor's hand and turned into a river of stars. It blasted towards Chu Fengmian. Dao Weiyue took out a curved blade. The moment the blade slashed out, it was like a crescent moon. It suddenly slashed towards Chu Fengmian. The Extreme Demon Emperor unleashed a torrential wave of devil will. Countless demon gods were born from this wave of devil will. These demon gods were not afraid of death as they charged towards Chu Fengmian in a frenzy. The three peak immortal kings all burst out with their full strength at this moment. They charged towards Chu Fengmian. Destroy! Chu Fengmian saw all this and sneered. He struck out with both swords. In an instant, a sword that was 100,000 feet long swept down. Rumble! Under this sword, it was as if all living things would be destroyed. Countless demon gods that were close to Chu Fengmian were all killed in a breath. At the same time, the power of this sword rushed to the sky and collided with the river of stars. Rumble! When they collided, it turned into a huge explosion. The river of stars was destroyed by the sword, and the power of the stars was shattered. The Star Emperor's face changed drastically. He quickly retreated, but he was still enveloped by the power of the sword light. A few crisp sounds rang out from Star Emperor's body. The star robe on Star Emperor's body, which was formed by hundreds of stars, was riddled with cracks from the collisions. Chu Fengmian's sword not only neutralized the attacks of the Star Emperor and the others, but also shattered the Star Emperor's star robe of Dubhe Hall. Die! Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. After forcing everyone to retreat, his figure flashed and jumped in the air. Chapter 2341. Chu Fengmian's speed was so fast that no one could see his escape light clearly. Even the people present, who were all peak immortal kings, could not see Fengmian's escape light clearly. By the time they noticed Chu Fengmian, he had already arrived in front of Star Sovereign and was about to slash down with his sword. Blood Moon. But just as Chu Fengmian was about to attack, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was Dao Weiyue. The scimitar in his hand had already turned blood red. From the thick smell of blood it contained, it was unknown how many blood essences it had devoured. Dao Weiyue appeared behind Chu Fengmian and suddenly slashed at Chu Fengmian's back with the blood-red scimitar. It was unknown how much essence blood had accumulated within the curved blade. At this moment, it poured out in torrents and suddenly exploded. Blood essences were the source of a demon god's power. The blood essences accumulated in the blood-red scimitar had already become extremely violent under his control. Countless blood essences exploded, almost equivalent to dozens or hundreds of experts suddenly exploding. All of this was Dao Weiyue's strongest technique. Blood explosion technique. Boom! The power of the blood essence explosion enveloped Chu Fengmian. So much blood essence? It actually took the initiative to come to me. Then I won't be polite. Chu Fengmian saw the blood essence explosion and did not panic at all. Instead, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. Suddenly, a huge figure appeared behind Chu Fengmian. It was the heaven-devouring beast. the heaven-devouring beast was thousands of feet tall. It suddenly opened its mouth and turned into a huge vortex. Suddenly, the violet power in the countless blood essences was completely suppressed. The countless blood essences were directly devoured by the vortex and turned into Chu Fengmian's power. Dao Yue's strongest technique was easily neutralized by Chu Fengmian. Even the blood essences he had painstakingly accumulated had become Chu Fengmian's tonic. The blood essences of dozens of immortal kings. How long has Dao Yue been accumulating them? Chu Fengmian devoured the essence blood and felt the power contained in it. He was shocked. The essence blood contained in this blood-red machete was equivalent to the essence blood of dozens of immortal kings. It was at least the essence blood of 50 to 60 immortal kings. Compared to when Chu Fengmian had threatened the Valley of the Medicine Masters, he had gained more from the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Good, good. Dao Yue, I didn't expect you to give me such a great gift today. As compensation, I can give you a quick death. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed. This time, he suddenly obtained a pile of essence blood. As long as he killed all the others today, he would have enough essence blood to condense the fifth immortal inscription. How could Chu Fengmian not be happy? In contrast, on the other side, Dao Yue's expression was extremely ugly. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined such a result. He had saved up so much essence blood to condense that blood-red machete. It was his final trump card, prepared to kill Chu Fengmian. He did not expect to give it all to Chu Fengmian. Looking at the murderous intent in Chu Fengmian's eyes, he panicked and hurriedly wanted to retreat. But Chu Fengmian was faster than him. Almost immediately, he slashed down with his sword. Yin and Yang. The power of Yin and Yang gathered on the blade and suddenly slashed down. The Great Way of the Ancients. The Desolate Bone and the Desolate Celestial Gang attacked again. The most powerful aspect of the Great Way of the Ancients was its defense. It could be said to be the best defensive secret technique in the 9 regions. They used the Great Way of the Ancients to protect everyone and prevent Chu Fengmian from attacking. Chu Fengmian's sword was only 3 feet away from Dao Yue, but it was stopped by a force of the Ancients and could not go any further. The Great Way of the Ancients? What is it? Break for me. Split open the sky. Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a bit of coldness. In his body, the power of the ancient book of swordsmanship was pushed to the extreme. The power contained in countless swordsmanship was now all added to the 2 swords. He slashed out with the sword. Rumble. The power of this sword contained the power to split open the heavens and earth. In front of Dao Yue, the barrier formed by the Great Way of the Ancients trembled violently and could collapse at any time. The Great Way of the Ancients was known as the strongest defense in the 9 regions. But Chu Fengmian's split the sky was also Chu Fengmian's strongest sword. The word split the sky represented the power of this sword. Nothing could stop the sharpness of this sword. The Desolate Celestial Gang and the Desolate Bone now looked serious. They had almost used all their strength to support the Great Way of the Ancients in front of Dao Yue. Even the Great Way of the Ancients under their feet had completely disappeared. Clearly, they had used all their strength. But after being hit by the sword again and again, the 2 of them could not hold on any longer. Suddenly, as if they had been hit hard, they retreated. The Great Way of the Ancients in front of Dao Yue shattered and could no longer resist Chu Fengmian's sword. 10 directions descend. At this moment, the Demon Emperor, who had not made a move all this time, could not help but make a move. Demonic will descended from his body and 10 huge figures appeared behind him. These 10 huge figures were the 10 Directions Sky Demons, the ancestor of the demon race. The 10 Directions Sky Demons were all condensed. Compared to the last time Chu Fengmian fought with the Demon Emperor, the power of the 10 Directions Sky Demons was completely different from before. At a glance, each of the 10 Directions Sky Demons looked as if they were alive. It was as if the real 10 Directions Sky Demons had been resurrected. Especially now that Chu Fengmian had transformed into the Bronze Sky Demon and appeared with the 10 Directions Sky Demons behind the Demon Emperor, it was as if there were 2 bronze sky demons in the world. The power of each of the 10 directions sky demons was at the pinnacle of the immortal king realm. They were not inferior to the Star Emperor and the others. The Demon Emperor waved his hand and turned it into a huge demonic claw. He suddenly attacked Chu Fengmian. At the same time, the 10 directions sky demons condensed behind him also attacked together. The moment the Demon Emperor attacked, he exploded with power that was almost 11 times stronger. This was the true strength of the Demon Emperor. When Chu Fengmian saw the Demon Emperor attack, he did not dare to be careless. The moment the Demon Emperor attacked, Chu Fengmian understood that his strength was completely different from the Star Emperor and the others. He had obtained the inheritance of the 6 Paths Demon Gate and was known as the strongest genius in the history of the 6 Paths Demon Gate. There was no doubt about his strength. Even Chu Fengmian had to go all out to deal with him. Chu Fengmian immediately gave up on pursuing Dao Yue. He gathered power in his 2 swords and slashed out to meet the Demon Emperor's huge demonic claw. Chapter 2342. 9 Moves of Primogenitor. 9 Profound Sword Art. The power of Primogenitor Jianwang and the power of the stars gathered on the 2 swords and suddenly burst out, colliding with the Demon Emperor's demon claw in the air. Rumble. The entire star-sinking continent was shaking under the impact of the 2 forces, and the mountains were collapsing one after another. Such a collision of forces could simply blow up some weak continents. This power had already surpassed the level of a mortal king and reached the level of a mortal monarch. The moment the Demon Emperor attacked, he burst out with a power that was 11 times that of a peak immortal king. Even though Chu Fengmian faced the attack with all his might, he could still feel the 129,600 immortal crystals in his body trembling. The power was so strong that Chu Fengmian couldn't bear it. Under the collision of the swords, Chu Fengmian took a step back. At this moment, the Demon Emperor had no intention of letting Chu Fengmian go. As soon as the power of the Demon Claw was neutralized by Chu Fengmian, the Demon Emperor attacked again. Suddenly, several Demon Claw came crashing down. Behind him, the 10 heavenly demons attacked together with the Demon Emperor, and each of their attacks could explode with 11 times the power of their attacks. This is the true strength of the Demon Emperor. Not far away, Star Sovereign, Huang Tiangang, and the others were shocked when they saw the power of the Demon Emperor. Since the rise of the Demon Emperor, he rarely attacked. Although everyone knew that the Demon Emperor's strength wasn't below theirs, they were still shocked when they saw the Demon Emperor's full strength. The current strength of the Demon Emperor had completely stepped into the level of the immortal monarch. Even though his realm was still at the peak of the immortal king realm, the power he unleashed was even stronger than those martial artists and demon gods who had just stepped into the immortal monarch realm. The 10 sky demons were the demon ancestor, the strongest of the demon clan. Now, the Demon Emperor could summon 10 sky demons for his use. With such strength, no matter how strong this kid is, he will definitely die. After seeing the true strength of the Demon Emperor, they looked at Chu Fengmian as if they were looking at a dead man. In front of the Demon Emperor, no matter how strong Chu Fengmian was, there was no way he could survive. Looks like this kid won't be able to hold on any longer. Their gazes fell on Chu Fengmian's body. They saw that Chu Fengmian was beginning to feel overwhelmed under the continuous attacks of the Devil Emperor. It was extremely strenuous for him to block each attack, and he was forced to retreat several times. If it wasn't for Chu Fengmian's strong physical body, he would have been killed by the Devil Emperor. But even so, cracks still appeared on Chu Fengmian's body. Under the powerful bombardment of the Demon Emperor's power, Chu Fengmian's physical body couldn't hold on any longer. Unable to withstand such a huge power, it began to shatter. At the same time, the shadow of the divine tree behind Chu Fengmian began to blur. It seemed that the divine tree was unable to withstand the power of the Demon Emperor. Chu Fengmian, so what if you can temporarily defeat me? Today, I can still easily trample you under my feet. You are just a stepping stone on my path to invincibility. No matter who comes today, they won't be able to save you. You are the stepping stone on my path to invincibility. I want to step on you and become invincible. The Demon Emperor's eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. The enmity between him and Chu Fengmian was as deep as the sea. His rise to invincibility in the 9 regions was interrupted by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was even younger than him. As a result, the Demon Emperor wanted to kill Chu Fengmian all the time to wash away his shame. Today, he would use Chu Fengmian's blood to wash away his shame. Under this angry roar, the Demon Emperor's strength rose steadily. In an instant, it increased by several times. The shadows of the 10 heavenly demons shrouded the Demon Emperor and began to merge with him. At the same time, a terrifying and boundless power was brewing in the Demon Emperor's hands. It was condensing. This is the strongest attack of the 6 paths Demon Gate. Let's go, let's avoid it quickly. Seeing the Demon Emperor's state of accumulation, Star Emperor, Desolate Tiangang, Dao Weiyue, and the others' faces changed drastically. They all knew how terrifying this attack was. They all retreated, afraid that they would be affected. Die! This power was condensed to the extreme in an instant. Suddenly, the Demon Emperor's hands fell. In the sky, the billowing demon will suddenly turned into 2 huge demon claws. These 2 huge demon claws seemed to be summoned from the eternal demon realm. Under the power of these 2 huge demon claws, the entire Starsync continent turned into a demon realm. Before the power of these 2 huge demon claws, a continent was as fragile as a piece of paper. Eternal demon claws! Star Emperor and the others exclaimed when they saw the demon claws. They also knew that this was the strongest attack of the 6 paths Demon Gate. With the supreme demon force, they summoned the 2 strongest demon claws from the eternal demon realm. Legend had it that the owner of the eternal demon claws was a true demon emperor, an existence that could stand on equal footing with immortal emperors. Although these 2 demon claws were only shadows, they were still not something that immortal kings or immortal lords could withstand. Die! The demon emperor's face was somewhat ferocious. With a cold shout, the 2 eternal demon claws fell from the sky. The Starsync continent below shook violently and began to disintegrate. The Starsync continent could not withstand such a huge force and began to disintegrate. The earth was torn apart, and the mountains collapsed. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was rending. Chu Fengmian's body was suddenly bombarded by the 2 eternal demon claws and was sent deep into the ground of the Starsync continent. Not good, the continent is going to explode. Let's go! Star Emperor and the others saw this and their figures flashed. They directly flew out of the Starsync continent, and only stopped when they were thousands of miles away from the Starsync continent. At this time, they turned their heads and looked in the direction of the Starsync continent. The Starsync continent had completely disintegrated and exploded. Everywhere that could be seen was shrouded in countless explosions. These 2 eternal demon claws were enough to destroy the Starsync continent, which was famous for being a dangerous place in the extraterritorial Starsync continent. He's dead for sure. Even the Starsync continent can't withstand such a terrifying force, let alone that kid. Everyone looked in the direction where Chu Fengmian was hit and said one after another. Not to mention the terrifying power of the eternal demon claws, the power of the explosion of a continent was enough to kill an immortal king. So much so that they hurriedly fled, afraid that they would be caught in the explosion. Time seemed to have stopped. All that could be seen was the continent that was still exploding. As for Chu Fengmian's body, he was already drowned in countless explosions. Chapter 2343. The Demon Emperor flew out from the star-sinking continent and looked at the direction of the star-sinking continent from the starry sky. His face was somewhat pale. The 2 eternal ancient demon claws were the strongest attack he could summon with all his strength. After using it, he felt a little weak. He only recovered a little after swallowing a few immortal elixirs. What a pity. It's too easy for this kid to die like this. The Demon Emperor's face was still a little ferocious, as if he felt that it was too easy for Chu Fengmian to die like this. Chu Fengmian had humiliated the Demon Emperor several times. The Demon Emperor wanted to capture Chu Fengmian and torture him, but Chu Fengmian's strength was beyond his expectations. A total of 6 peak immortal kings were no match for Chu Fengmian, so he could only use all his strength to kill Chu Fengmian with the eternal ancient demon claws. Don't worry, Demon Emperor. Although that kid is dead, his sword Dao sect and his women are still there. When the time comes, Demon Emperor can capture them and torture them to relieve the hatred in your heart. The extreme Demon Emperor stood beside the Demon Emperor and said sternly. That's right. The Demon Emperor's eyes were a little ferocious. Chu Fengmian was dead, but he still had the sword Dao sect, Hanueli, Luoshi, and the others. When he destroyed the sword Dao sect, he could vent his anger. A quarter of an hour. The explosion caused by the star-sinking continent gradually calmed down. Everyone looked at the star-sinking continent, looking for Chu Fengmian's figure. Chu Fengmian had turned danger into safety too many times. Even when he was in danger, Chu Fengmian could still turn danger into safety. If Chu Fengmian didn't see the corpse, they wouldn't be completely relieved. I wonder if that kid is dead. Star Sovereign and the others were looking at the star-sinking continent. The star-sinking continent exploded, turning into a huge rock floating in the starry sky. For a moment, they couldn't see the scene inside. I'll go take a look. Yao Qingshan was the first to step out and immediately entered the shattered star-sinking continent. However, at the moment when Yao Qingshan approached the star-sinking continent, everyone suddenly heard a miserable scream. Then, everyone saw a sword light suddenly shoot out from the star-sinking continent. The power of this sword light shocked everyone. Countless people felt the terrifying power contained in this sword light. Yao Qingshan was sucked into the sword light. He could not even resist for a breath's time. His body exploded with a loud bang. His blood essence was completely devoured, and he died on the spot. That brat is not dead yet? Everyone's expression changed as they hurriedly searched for the direction of the sword light. A figure slowly walked out from the explosion. It was none other than Chu Fengmian. When Chu Fengmian walked out of the center of the explosion, he didn't appear to be in a sorry state at all. He didn't have any injuries, and his entire body was spotless. It was as if neither the explosion at the center of the star-sinking continent nor the 2 ancient demonic claws had caused any damage to Chu Fengmian. A gust of sword intent enveloped Chu Fengmian. All of the explosions were destroyed the moment they came close to the sword intent. All of these changes came from the spiritual sword in Chu Fengmian's hand. It was a sword they had never seen before. The Taichu sword. The sword of the greatest sword emperor, an extreme immoral weapon. Chu Fengmian's sword Dao had surpassed the immortal emperor realm. Even an immortal weapon couldn't bear his sword Dao. To a sword cultivator, a spiritual sword was as important as sword Dao. Although the ancestral dragon paragon sword and the titanic godly sword were both immortal weapons, and were even among the best among immortal weapons. They had evolved toward extreme immortal weapons, but they were ultimately not. In terms of power, they were far inferior to extreme immortal weapons. The Taichu sword, on the other hand, was a complete extreme immortal weapon. The moment Chu Fengmian held the Taichu sword in his hand was the moment his sword Dao truly erupted. Only an extreme immortal weapon could bear the full weight of Chu Fengmian's sword Dao. Shocking sword intent emanated from Chu Fengmian's body, dispelling the demonic will. The starry sky, which had once resembled an eternal demonic realm, had now become a land of sword Dao. The terrifying sword intent shrouded an area of millions of miles. No one could imagine just how powerful the sword Dao was. The sword intent alone was enough to destroy continents and stars. The power of everyone present was suppressed by the power of the sword principle. No power could compete with Chu Fengmian's sword principle. The Taichu sword didn't only bring Chu Fengmian great strength because of the sword itself, but also because it could bear the weight of his sword Dao. That was the most important thing for Chu Fengmian. It's really hard to kill you all without using my full strength. It seems that I've underestimated you. Chu Fengmian looked at the Demon Emperor, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He'd originally wanted to see if he could defeat the 7 of them without using the Taichu sword. But now, it seemed that he'd have a hard time dealing with the Demon Emperor even without the sword. However, with the Taichu sword in hand, Chu Fengmian's strength was completely different from before. The level of his sword Dao alone was like the difference between heaven and earth. Now, you all can die too. In an instant, the power in Chu Fengmian's body condensed to the extreme. He suddenly slashed with the Taichu sword. Rumble! Chu Fengmian's sword light swept through everything like a storm. Suddenly, the Star Emperor, Desolate Celestial Dipper, Dao Wuyue, and the remaining 6 experts were all swept into the storm. Countless sword light flashed in the storm all the time, mercilessly shattering all their defenses. Bam! The first to die in the storm was Dao Wuyue. He'd been seriously injured before, and now he couldn't withstand Chu Fengmian's power and died on the spot. Dao Wuyue was just the beginning. Desolate Sangu, the Star Emperor, and the Extreme Demon Emperor were all shattered in the storm like Dao Wuyue. He's dead for sure. Even the star-sinking continent couldn't withstand such terrifying power, let alone that kid. Everyone looked in the direction where Chu Fengmian had been struck and spoke out. Not to mention the terrifying power of the eternal demon claw, the power of the explosion of a continent was enough to kill an immortal king. So much so that they all hurriedly fled, afraid that they'd be caught in the explosion. Time seemed to have stopped. All that could be seen was the continent that was still exploding. As for Chu Fengmian's figure, he'd been drowned in countless explosions. Chapter 2344. The Desolate Celestial Star was no match for Chu Fengmian. The moment Chu Fengmian took out the Taichu sword, his strength was vastly different from the Desolate Celestial Star and the others. Under this sword, the Desolate Celestial Star fell. Among all of them, only the Demon Emperor managed to break free from the sword light. The Demon Emperor's face was extremely pale. It took him almost all his strength to break free from the sword light. Who the hell are you? That sword, what the hell is that sword? It's impossible, no one can defeat me. The Demon Emperor shouted in disbelief. He couldn't accept that Chu Fengmian could escape from the eternal demon claw unscathed. Even his current strength made him feel incomparably terrified. His strength had already surpassed the peak of the Immortal King realm and reached the Immortal Lord realm. But now, in front of Chu Fengmian, he still couldn't fight back. How strong was Chu Fengmian? He couldn't believe that there was someone who could trample on him again and again. Even now, Chu Fengmian was only a half-step celestial being. He hadn't even passed the celestial tribulation. All of this made the Demon Emperor feel a little crazy. Last time, you were lucky enough to escape from the person who killed you. This time, no one can save you. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. Back when he attacked the 6-path demon gates, Chu Fengmian had planned to kill the Demon Emperor. Unfortunately, he was stopped by the Celestial Demon Supremacy, who even forced Chu Fengmian to use the Bloodlust Demon Sword. In the end, he failed to kill the Demon Emperor. Chu Fengmian had failed once. There wouldn't be a second time. Die! Chu Fengmian's sword slashed down once again. The power of this slash sealed the surrounding space completely. No matter how hard the Demon Emperor tried to activate his secret technique, he was unable to break through the space around him. He could only watch helplessly as the sword slashed towards him. No, I'm the Demon Emperor. I'm the future Supreme Demon Supremacy. How can I die? How can I die? The Demon Emperor roared furiously. The demonic will on his body completely erupted. His body was shrouded by countless demonic wills, turning into a pitch-black mass. It was as if he had gathered all his strength on this attack. What a waste of effort. Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change. Once again, he slashed out with his sword. The layers of darkness were sliced apart, and the Devil Emperor was slain on the spot by Chu Fengmian's sword. Chu Fengmian immediately devoured the blood essence and fused it into his body. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had used the Taichu sword, and he had easily killed all 7 peak immortal kings. Even the Demon Emperor, whose strength had reached the level of a celestial duke, could not hold on for long under the Taichu sword. The strength of an extreme Dao immortal weapon is indeed terrifying. No wonder it's recorded in the ancient books that the strength of an expert with an extreme Dao immortal weapon is completely different from that of an expert without one. The strength of an extreme Dao immortal weapon is decisive even in a battle between immortal venerables and immortal emperors. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He had originally predicted that he would be able to kill all 7 of them with the Taichu sword in hand. However, things had gone so smoothly that it had exceeded Chu Fengmian's expectations. The strength of an extreme Dao immortal weapon was much stronger than Chu Fengmian had imagined. This is nothing. The Taichu sword has only recovered about 50% of its strength. If it had recovered its full strength, people like the Demon Emperor and the others wouldn't even be able to take a single blow from you. Elder Fan's voice sounded in Chu Fengmian's mind. Only half of its strength? Chu Fengmian sighed when he heard this. The Taichu sword had been shattered before. Although Chu Fengmian had expelled the demonic will from it and could restore it, the sword had still been damaged. However, the Taichu sword was still damaged after being shattered, and it had only recovered half of its power. In fact, there was still a gap between it and a true extreme Dao immortal weapon. If the Taichu sword with half of its strength was already so terrifying, Chu Fengmian didn't dare to imagine how powerful it would be when it was at its peak. Elder Fan, how do I restore the power of the Taichu sword? What materials do I need? Wondrous items? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but ask. The Taichu sword could be said to be Chu Fengmian's greatest trump card. With it, Chu Fengmian had the ability to fight against immortal lords. The 3 sacred realms that Chu Fengmian was about to head to weren't as peaceful as the 9 realms. The 3 sacred realms were truly filled with powerhouses. Immortal lords, celestial saints, celestial venerables, and even rumored immortal emperors existed in the 3 sacred realms. Chu Fengmian's strength was still very weak in the face of these invincible powerhouses. He needed to increase his strength as soon as possible. There's no other way. The Taichu sword can recover 50% of its strength because it wasn't severely damaged. Although it's broken, it can be rebuilt and maintained with my power. However, the damage it sustained isn't something that can be repaired with materials or wondrous items. Elder Fan said. However, the Taichu sword can be hidden in your body and nurtured with your sword will. Your sword will is already imperceptibly affecting the spiritual sword, so the Taichu sword can gradually recover under the nurturing of your sword will. This requires a certain amount of time. However, as you become stronger and stronger, this time will also shorten. Nurture with my sword will? Chu Fengmian nodded when he heard Elder Fan's words. He released his hand, and the Taichu sword turned into a stream of light and drilled into his body. Chu Fengmian was no stranger to nurturing a spiritual sword with his sword will. It could be said that the 2 spiritual swords in Chu Fengmian's possession, the Ancestral Dragon Sword and the Titanic Pagoda Divine Sword, were much more powerful than when he'd first obtained them. They'd even transformed into extreme immortal weapons because of the nurturing of Chu Fengmian's sword will. Many extreme Dao immortal armaments were once only immortal armaments, or even immortal armaments. However, as they grew with their masters, they eventually transformed into extreme Dao immortal armaments. The Taichu sword used to be an immortal weapon, but it followed the first sword emperor and eventually became an extreme immortal weapon. The power of the Taichu sword is indeed terrifying, but it can only be used as a final trump card. It took a few minutes for Chu Fengmian's strength to finally recover. The Taichu sword's power was indeed terrifying, but every time it was used, it consumed a terrifying amount of energy. Even with Chu Fengmian's abundant strength, he'd only been able to use the sword 4 times before he'd exhausted more than half of his strength. Chu Fengmian predicted that he'd only be able to use the Taichu sword 7 or 8 times with all his strength before he'd run out of energy. He'd set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Chapter 2345. The Taichu sword was an extreme immortal weapon with unparalleled power, but it was extremely difficult to wield it. Just like when Chu Fengmian had just obtained the fragment of the Emperor Jar, he could barely wield it with all his might. Chu Fengmian's current strength was at least equivalent to peak Immortal King, close to the level of immortal monarchs, but he could only wield it 7 or 8 times before his strength was exhausted. Moreover, as Chu Fengmian grew stronger and stronger, his Divine Pulse's recovery ability was far inferior to before. If it were an ordinary battle, Chu Fengmian's Divine Pulse would still be able to recover his strength. However, the power he consumed to wield the Taichu sword far exceeded the recovery speed of his Divine Pulse. Once Chu Fengmian's strength was exhausted, he would need close to 10 minutes to fully recover even with the help of his Divine Pulse. This was already extremely shocking. The more powerful one was, the more years it would take to recover once their strength was exhausted. However, in a battle, even a moment of exhaustion could decide the outcome of the battle. Therefore, Chu Fengmian couldn't wield the Taichu sword unless he was in a desperate situation. However, the Taichu sword was also one of Chu Fengmian's trump cards. Chu Fengmian had yet to meet a true immortal monarch, but he was confident that he could at least force one to retreat when using the Taichu sword. This was already a great gain for Chu Fengmian. As for ordinary battles, he still had to rely on the ancestral dragon sword and the titanic godly sword. Elder Fan, where are the other 3 swords of the first Sword Emperor now? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked. The Taichu sword wasn't the only sword of the first Sword Emperor. Taichu, Chaos, Universe, and Void were the 4 swords. The names of these 4 swords represented the reincarnation of a world. Among the 4, the Taichu sword was the earliest sword and the one that had followed the first Sword Emperor the longest. Now that Chu Fengmian had obtained the inheritance of the first Sword Emperor, he wanted the other 3 swords as well. The strongest sword technique of the first Sword Emperor required the use of all 4 swords. I don't know. Master left me in the Pure Land Buddhist temple to suppress Demon Emperor Bloodlust, but even I don't know where the other 3 swords are. Elder Fan shook his head when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. However, now that you have inherited the inheritance of the number 1 Sword Emperor, the remaining 3 spiritual swords have a kind of attraction. As long as you are near them, you will be able to feel it. Master has been to the 3 sacred realms, the outer space, and even the 9 realms of heaven. However, you have great luck. You will definitely have a chance to find other spiritual swords in the future. The concept of luck was illusory. There were even some immortal emperors who couldn't see through the profundities of fate. However, there were indeed some people in the world who were blessed by fate. Everything went smoothly, and they became invincible experts. The Demon Emperor was actually a person with great luck. He had inherited the inheritance of the 6 Paths Demon Gate and was invincible. Even if his Nirvana godly physique was crippled by Chu Fengmian, he would still be able to obtain a greater opportunity to raise his strength. However, in the end, the Demon Emperor was still defeated by Chu Fengmian. If he hadn't met Chu Fengmian, the Devil Emperor might have become an invincible giant at the Immortal Emperor level in the future. He might even have unified the 9 domains. Even if I can't find it, I'm not in a hurry. Chu Fengmian sighed. Chu Fengmian couldn't fully control the Taichu sword to unleash its full power. Even if he could obtain the other 3 swords, he wouldn't be able to unleash their full power. Extreme immortal weapons were basically only those who were invincible among immortal sovereigns, or even immortal emperors, were qualified to wield them. Not even celestial saints were qualified to wield an extreme immortal weapon. It was already extremely fortunate for Chu Fengmian to be able to wield the Taichu sword. Once he headed to the 3 sacred regions, Chu Fengmian would have to hide the Taichu sword. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Even if Chu Fengmian's strength had reached the level of an immortal duke, not even a true immortal duke or celestial saint was qualified to wield an extreme immortal weapon. If he took out the Taichu sword, it would definitely attract the attention of others. Celestial saints, or even celestial sovereigns would come to snatch it from him. Unless absolutely necessary, the Taichu sword couldn't be unsheathed. The essence blood required to condense the 5th inscription is far from enough. Chu Fengmian observed the state of his body. Although he had devoured the blood essence accumulated on Dao Wuyua's blood-red scimitar, and Chu Fengmian had killed the Demon Emperor and the others, he had devoured all of their blood essence. However, the essence blood required to condense the fifth inscription was still not enough. Every time an inscription was condensed, the amount of blood essence required would increase exponentially. If he couldn't condense the inscription, it would be difficult for Chu Fengmian's strength to improve. However, the trouble of the 7 great sects had been temporarily resolved. Almost all the experts of the 7 great sects in the 9 domains had been killed by Chu Fengmian. The only peak immortal king that Chu Fengmian knew of was the medicine master of the Medicine Master Valley. However, the medicine master had been severely injured when he fought with Chu Fengmian. It would be impossible for him to recover in a few years. Moreover, the medicine master wasn't good at fighting. With the Alcade Star Emperor overseeing the Sword Dao sect, even the medicine master wouldn't dare attack. Before the experts of the 9 domains descended, the Sword Dao sect should be incomparably safe now. This also made Chu Fengmian feel a lot more at ease. He could also leave the 9 domains at ease and head to the 3 great sacred domains. Chu Fengmian had to go to the 3 great sacred domains to pass the immortal tribulation and step into the immortal realm. After temporarily resolving the grudge with the 7 great sects, Chu Fengmian should also set off. Glancing at the shattered star-sinking continent below, Chu Fengmian activated his escape light and immediately flew in the direction of the star cave. There are only 7 or 8 star domains left to the star cave. I can reach it in half a day. As Chu Fengmian muttered to himself, he sped up his escape light. Previously, Chu Fengmian had deliberately lowered his escape light in order to stall for time so that the Taichu sword could recover its power. Otherwise, with Chu Fengmian's current full strength, he could pass through about 20 star domains in a day. Chu Fengmian's escape light flew all the way. Without the threat of the 7 great sects for the time being, Chu Fengmian's heart was extremely relaxed. However, this was only temporary. The 7 great sects of the 9 domains were, in fact, just the tip of the iceberg. The 9 domains behind them were Chu Fengmian's true enemy, the most terrifying existence. Chu Fengmian could be said to be invincible in the 9 domains, but now any immortal saint from the 9 domains could easily kill him. Chapter 2346. Now that Chu Fengmian had inherited the Sword Emperor Crown's memory, he knew a lot about Tianjiu Domain and the 3 great saint domains. Although celestial saints were absolute overlords in Tianjiu Domain, Chu Fengmian was the disciple of the Master of Sword Dao. Tianjiu Domain had once besieged the Master of Sword Dao, and even celestial emperors had been mobilized. It wasn't strange for a celestial saint to be mobilized for Chu Fengmian. The 7 major sects represented the giants that controlled the entire Tianjiu Domain. Their strength was unfathomable. Chu Fengmian didn't dare to be careless now. The best chance to improve his strength was to step into the celestial realm. Once he stepped into the celestial realm, Chu Fengmian's accumulation of various opportunities would be completely unleashed. At that time, Chu Fengmian would be considered a true expert. After passing through 7 or 8 star domains, the scene in front of him suddenly became illusory. Chu Fengmian felt that the vast starry sky in front of him was already in between reality and illusion. There were countless spatial turbulences and spatial storms that were running rampant in it. Vaguely, this starry sky was a huge pitch-black ring. In the depths of this ring, it seemed to be connected to other places. This is the star hole. Chu Fengmian couldn't help muttering to himself when he saw the scene in front of him. Chu Fengmian had only seen some descriptions of this star hole in the Sword Emperor Crown's memory. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, it was even more shocking than the description. The huge star hole was as big as several star domains. He couldn't see the end of it at a glance. It was pitch black inside the star hole, and no one dared to approach it. Chu Fengmian observed the star hole in front of him. After confirming that it was the same star hole as the Sword Emperor Crown's memory, Chu Fengmian moved and slowly stepped into the star hole. Chu Fengmian's escape light had just entered the star hole when he seemed to have arrived at another space. The star hole was a unique area created by the collision between 2 universes. Its laws were different from the laws of the extraterritorial starry sky. It was more solid. The moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the star hole, a spatial storm swept towards Chu Fengmian. Spatial storms weren't rare in the extraterritorial starry sky. It was also one of the biggest troubles that demon gods encountered when they traveled through the extraterritorial starry sky. However, typical warriors and demon gods at Emperor Gu's level had the ability to traverse the cosmos with their bodies. They could withstand the attacks of spatial storms. However, the spatial storm in the star hole was much more powerful than the one in the extraterritorial starry sky. Chu Fengmian's body swayed slightly when the spatial storm reached him. This spatial storm had the ability to affect Chu Fengmian. It should be noted that with Chu Fengmian's current strength, an ordinary celestial realm martial artist or demon god would not be able to shake Chu Fengmian in the slightest even if they attacked him with all their might. Only immortal warriors, or even immortal general realm martial artists and demon immortals can withstand this spatial storm. Chu Fengmian observed the power of the spatial storm and said aloud. An immortal warrior who has just stepped into the celestial realm would have to rely on the power of an immortal artifact to resist it. This spatial storm was nothing to Chu Fengmian, but to a celestial realm martial artist, it was already considered a considerable trouble. Therefore, in the memory of the Sword Emperor crown, there was a reminder that martial artists and demon gods who had not passed the celestial tribulation could not pass through the star hole. Moreover, even among the celestial realm, one had to be at least immortal warriors or even immortal generals to safely pass through the star hole and head to the three great sacred regions. Although Chu Fengmian's current realm was only half a step into the celestial realm, his true strength had already reached the level of immortal lord. The spatial storm in the star hole had no effect on Chu Fengmian at all. Chu Fengmian only took a glance and continued to fly deeper into the star hole. On the other side of the deepest part of the star hole was the universe where the three great sacred regions were located. It was no wonder that there had always been rumors about the three great sacred regions in the extraterritorial starry sky, but there were very few people who had actually come into contact with them. The three great sacred regions and the extraterritorial starry sky were not in the same universe. Apart from celestial realm experts, others could not enter the three great sacred regions at all. In this star hole, there were dangerous spatial storms, spatial turbulence, and even some spatial rifts and so on. Among them, the most dangerous were the spatial rifts. The star hole was an area created by the collision between two universes. However, during this collision, some spatial rifts would also appear. These spatial rifts were located between the two universes. At every moment, it would be squeezed between the two universes. Once someone fell into the spatial rifts, there was almost no chance of survival. No one could survive the collision between the two universes. Chu Fengmian could not imagine how great the power of a universe was. Even with his current strength, Chu Fengmian could not explore how big the extraterritorial starry sky was. Chu Fengmian did not dare to try the collision force. When encountering spatial rifts, Chu Fengmian would also stay far away, not daring to touch them. Fortunately, spatial rifts generally stayed in one place. As long as one did not take the initiative to approach them, there would generally be no danger. The star hole was as big as a dozen star domains. After a full day, Chu Fengmian had only flown about half the distance of the star hole. In this star hole, in addition to the three great dangers of spatial storms, spatial turbulence, and spatial rifts, there were also some strange dangers. There were many dangers that even the Sword Emperor crown did not record in detail. After all, even an immortal emperor might not be able to understand all the mysteries of the star hole. Chu Fengmian did not dare to fly at full speed. He was also paying attention to the surrounding situation at all times to avoid encountering any danger. Among the martial artists and demon immortals who had tried to enter the three great sacred regions through the star hole, many had died in the star hole. Chu Fengmian moved forward carefully. During this day, Chu Fengmian did not encounter any danger. When encountering some spatial rifts, Chu Fengmian avoided them. During this day, Chu Fengmian did not encounter any other martial artists or demon immortals in the Star Hole. The Star Hole was incomparably dangerous. Apart from the martial artists and demon immortals who had decided to enter the three great sacred regions, no one else would set foot in it. Chu Fengmian moved forward all by himself. However, Chu Fengmian discovered many tracks. Some tracks were clearly the tracks of people who had passed through. Some of the tracks were at most a few years old. Clearly, there were people who had used the Star Hole to enter the three great sacred regions recently. This made Chu Fengmian feel a lot more at ease. What Chu Fengmian was most worried about was whether the Star Hole would undergo any changes in the tens of millions of years. After all, Chu Fengmian knew about the Star Hole from the Sword Emperor crown. It had been tens of millions of years since the destruction of the Sword Sect. Chapter 2347. The Star Hole was the place where two universes collided. Generally, it would not change since its birth. However, there were exceptions to everything. There were some records in the Sword Emperor crown that some changes had occurred in some Star Holes, causing countless chaotic places to appear. Today, all the martial artists and demon gods in those places had fallen. Chu Fengmian was relieved to see that there were still people passing through the Star Hole in recent years. He continued to move forward. As Chu Fengmian entered the depths of the Star Hole, there were more and more spatial storms in the Star Hole. However, these spatial storms did not have much effect on Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian soon noticed that the surrounding laws had undergone some changes. The Star Cavern was a place where two universes collided. For example, when Chu Fengmian had first entered the Star Cavern, the magical laws within had been closer to those of the starry sky outside the realm. It had only been affected by the three saint realms that had caused some changes. Now, as Chu Fengmian had crossed more than half of the Star Hole, he had arrived at a place closer to the three great sacred realms. The surrounding laws were much stronger than the laws of the extraterritorial starry sky, especially the Space Tao. Chu Fengmian estimated that only martial artists and demon gods who had reached the Immortal King realm had the ability to break through space. The laws here were many times stronger than those in the extraterritorial starry sky. In the extraterritorial starry sky, an emperor could easily break through space. However, in the area where Chu Fengmian was now, one had to be at least an immortal king to do so. These were not the complete laws of the three great sacred realms. After all, this was still the Star Hole. Although it was very close to the three great sacred realms, it was still affected by some of the laws of the extraterritorial starry sky. The real laws of the three great sacred realms might be much stronger than here. According to the Sword Emperor crown's memory, the spatial laws of the three great sacred realms needed at least an existence at the peak of the immortal monarch realm to be qualified to break through. It could be said that if Chu Fengmian went to the three great sacred realms now, it would be very difficult for him to break through space. The laws of the two were on a completely different level. However, Chu Fengmian was not surprised by this. The laws of heaven and earth represented the upper limit of a universe. It was like a shallow pond, it was impossible for a huge whale to be born. If the laws of the three great sacred realms were the same as the outer realm, there wouldn't be so many experts born. This was also the reason why the martial artists and demon gods in the outer realm were usually at the peak of the immortal king realm at most. It wasn't that they didn't want to break through, but because the laws of the outer realm were too weak, it was extremely difficult for them to improve. For example, in the 9 domains, because the 7 major sects were related to the 9 domains, there were still peak immortal kings who were willing to stay. In the outer realms, most immortal generals and immortal marquises would leave the outer realms and head to the three great sacred realms to break through to higher realms. However, Chu Fengmian was even more special. However, his cultivation level had been stuck at the half-step celestial realm. That was because if he wanted to pass the great tribulation of the celestial realm, he needed the power of heaven and earth. Even if all the power of heaven and earth in the 9 regions were added together, it would not be enough. In the entire outer space, there was no place for Chu Fengmian to transcend the Deva tribulation. As a result, Chu Fengmian's cultivation was stuck at the half-step Deva realm, unable to advance any further. This was also the biggest reason why Chu Fengmian wanted to go to the three great sacred realms. The closer he got to the three great sacred realms, the more Chu Fengmian felt that the power of heaven and earth around him had changed along with the laws. The power of heaven and earth here had reached the level of 3 or 4 times that of the 9 domains. Vaguely, the power of heaven and earth began to accumulate above Chu Fengmian's head. Chu Fengmian's strength had long reached the level of triggering the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm. Originally, when Chu Fengmian left the ruins of the Shang Sword sect, he was already unable to suppress the power of heaven and earth from descending. However, at that time, because the power of heaven and earth in the 9 domains did not accumulate for Chu Fengmian's Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm, it did not descend for a long time. Now, Chu Fengmian's strength was more than 10 times or 100 times stronger than when he had just left the ruins of the Shang Sword sect. Chu Fengmian also felt that the moment he stepped into the 3 great sacred realms, the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm would descend. However, he did not expect that Chu Fengmian had not really stepped into the 3 great sacred realms yet. He was still in the Star Cave, and the power of heaven and earth had begun to accumulate. This was obviously the time to gather power and prepare to trigger the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm. It's a little troublesome. Chu Fengmian's expression changed slightly. Transcending the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm shouldn't pose any danger to Chu Fengmian with his current strength. Even if Chu Fengmian was a mutated species of the world and was not tolerated by the heavenly Tao, now that Chu Fengmian was in control of the Taichu sword and his strength had reached the immortal monarch realm, no matter how powerful the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm was, it should not be able to threaten Chu Fengmian. Even the heavenly Tao had its own rules, and the power of the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm could not grow endlessly. However, what Chu Fengmian did not expect was that the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm would descend in the Star Cave. The Star Cave was an extremely dangerous place, especially the spatial fissures in it. Once Chu Fengmian accidentally entered it, he would fall into an irrecoverable situation. Moreover, in addition to the spatial storms and spatial fissures, there were even more terrifying dangers in the Star Cave. Where 2 universes collided, all kinds of dangers could appear. Therefore, generally, those who passed through the Star Cave were very careful and did not dare to stay in the Star Cave for fear of encountering danger. However, according to the speed at which the power of heaven and earth was condensing, Chu Fengmian's Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm would descend in the Star Cave. This was extremely dangerous for Chu Fengmian. Transcending the tribulation in the Star Cave was simply an act of courting death. If there was any accident, Chu Fengmian would die on the spot. Chu Fengmian had calculated everything, but he had never considered this point. Even if he had calculated this point, Chu Fengmian didn't have a second path to take. There was only one way to go to the 3 great sacred regions through the Star Cave. No matter which Star Cave Chu Fengmian went to, he would face this scene. Even if Chu Fengmian retreated now and came a second time, the result would be the same. Damn it, I didn't expect to be tricked. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. He noticed that the gathering of the power of heaven and earth was not normal. It was not gathering normally, but was shrouded by an invisible force that condensed the power of heaven and earth of the entire Star Cave. Obviously, the Great Tribulation of the Celestial Realm would descend in the Star Cave, forcing Chu Fengmian to transcend the tribulation in the Star Cave. Chapter 2348. Originally, the celestial tribulation was not very dangerous to Chu Fengmian, but if it came in the Star Cave, it would be completely different. In particular, the Star Cave was a unique area produced by the collision of 2 universes. It was extremely unstable. Even in normal times, it would produce some special fluctuations, which would become a lot of dangers in the Star Cave. If the celestial tribulation came, no one knew what kind of impact it would have on the Star Cave. The power of heaven and earth gathered above Chu Fengmian's head like a time bomb that could explode at any time. It could even detonate the Star Cave. I must leave as soon as possible. Chu Fengmian made a prompt decision. He suddenly accelerated and flew toward the end of the star cave. Even if Chu Fengmian retreated now, the celestial tribulation would come the next time he entered the star cave. It was impossible for Chu Fengmian to avoid it. Therefore, it was meaningless to lie low for the time being. What's more, the 9 heavens regions were about to appear. Chu Fengmian didn't have much time left. He didn't want to waste any more time. It was better to rush out directly. As long as he could leave the star cave and enter the 3 sacred realms, the celestial tribulation would not pose much threat to him. Chu Fengmian's escape light was pushed to the extreme, and its speed was 2 or 3 times faster than before. Previously, Chu Fengmian was still observing the various structures and mysteries in the star cave. After all, this was the first time Chu Fengmian saw the star cave with his own eyes. But now, Chu Fengmian didn't have the energy to pay attention to it. Chu Fengmian pushed the escape light to the extreme and flew toward the depths of the star cave. At the same time, he had his doppelganger pay attention to the space cracks, so as not to accidentally enter them. At the same time, the power of heaven and earth was still accumulating above Chu Fengmian's head. The power of heaven and earth was several times more condensed than the strongest state of the 9 heavens regions. The stronger Chu Fengmian was, the more opportunities he would get, and the more terrifying the power of the celestial tribulation would be. It could be said that the celestial tribulation that Chu Fengmian was about to face might become the most powerful celestial tribulation in the world, which could be recorded in history. According to the previous speed, it would take at least 1 day to reach the other side of the star cave. But now, in just 6 hours, Chu Fengmian's escape light had already covered more than half the distance. As Chu Fengmian got closer and closer to the 3 sacred domains, the various nomological laws in the space around him also developed in the direction of the 3 sacred domains. At the same time, the power of heaven and earth contained in it also became stronger. The speed at which the power of heaven and earth gathered above Chu Fengmian's head became even faster. A vast expanse of tribulation clouds had gathered over Chu Fengmian's head, hundreds or even thousands of times larger than the tribulation clouds that appeared during the Deva tribulation. As the power of heaven and earth continued to gather, the tribulation clouds continued to expand. Wherever Chu Fengmian's escape light went, that place would be shrouded by layers of tribulation clouds. The tribulation clouds would follow Chu Fengmian wherever he went. The speed of condensation has increased. We need to speed up. Chu Fengmian didn't dare to be careless. Once the celestial tribulation descended in the star cave, Chu Fengmian was well aware of the countless dangers involved. Chu Fengmian suddenly let out a long roar, and the bloodline of progenitor Jianwang erupted from his bloodline. Billowing bloodline power condensed on Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian transformed into progenitor Jianwang's appearance and flew into the depths of the star cave like a stream of light. After transforming into progenitor Jianwang, Chu Fengmian's escape light became much faster. Chu Fengmian's transformation into progenitor Jianwang might not be his strongest state, but it was his fastest state. Progenitor Jianwang controlled the Tao of space. Once Chu Fengmian transformed into progenitor Jianwang, he could feel that the suppression of the surrounding nomological laws on Chu Fengmian had lessened a lot, allowing Chu Fengmian to move even faster. Another 2 hours later, Chu Fengmian had entered the deepest part of the star cave. He could even vaguely see the dazzling light in the depths of the star cave. The celestial 9 domains were already in front of him. Rumble! But at this moment, the sound of thunder resounded. From the tribulation cloud above Chu Fengmian's head, a thunderclap resounded, and a golden thunderbolt blasted towards Chu Fengmian. Damn it, I still can't dodge it. Chu Fengmian's face turned extremely ugly when he heard the thunderclap. He originally wanted to wait until the Great Tribulation of Deva to rush into the celestial 9 domains, but he didn't expect that the Great Tribulation of Deva would still come. Even Chu Fengmian felt that the power of the Great Tribulation of Deva hadn't accumulated to the peak yet, but it still fell in a hurry. It seemed to be deliberately leaving Chu Fengmian in the star cave so that the tribulation would come. Since you want to kill me so much, I'd like to see what you can do. Chu Fengmian's face showed some anger. The Great Tribulation of Deva was deliberately targeting Chu Fengmian. Since there was no way to avoid it, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be afraid of it. So what if he underwent the tribulation in the Star Cave? Chu Fengmian had done more than one or two heaven-defying things. So what if he did one more? Sword out. Chu Fengmian raised his head and looked at the descending golden thunderbolt. With a long roar, he immediately turned into his human form and drew out his two swords. Suddenly, a sword light pointed at the sky and slashed out. Bam! The descending golden thunderbolt was suddenly torn apart by the sword light. It exploded and was destroyed by the sword light. However, more golden thunderbolts came down from the tribulation cloud. The tribulation cloud above Chu Fengmian's head was almost 10,000 times larger than the tribulation clouds condensed by other people's Great Tribulation of Deva. This also meant that Chu Fengmian had to bear the Great Tribulation of Deva that was 10,000 times stronger than that of other martial artists and demon gods. Chu Fengmian, as a variant of heaven and earth, was not tolerated by the way of heaven. Any tribulation was the best time to kill Chu Fengmian. The Great Tribulation of Deva chose to forcibly descend in the Star Cave in order to use the power of the Star Cave to kill Chu Fengmian here. The rolling thunderbolts condensed together and fell from the sky like rolling seawater. There were tens of thousands of golden thunderbolts in the sea of thunderbolts. The power of each of these golden thunderbolts was not inferior to the full strength of a Deva realm martial artist. Although a celestial realm warrior was nothing in front of the current Chu Fengmian, once 10,000 celestial realm warriors attacked together, the power that erupted was incomparably terrifying. It was even enough to shake the immortal monarchs. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.